Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to the Erasmus Peacebuilder Forum. The forum is a result of joint efforts of multiple youth activists, volunteers, trainers, and experts united for a common goal. We find that Erasmus Plus program and youth exchange in general have made a significant contribution towards intercultural dialogue and social cohesion, and we would like to see it empower even more youth peace builders worldwide. This forum aims to extend solidarity to all of our friends and colleagues across the world who try not only survive but also build their futures in crisis contexts. We hope that this forum and subsequent activities of Erasmus Plus Peace Builder Network will create a platform of exchange and help build networks of solidarity and mutual support. This requires joint efforts of our experts, participants, members, and everyone joining live. Finally, on behalf of the organizing team, I would like to thank the Erasmus Plus Student and Alumni Alliance and the European Commission Directorate for Education and Culture for supporting us in this journey. I wish everyone fruitful and insightful discussions. Right now, I would like to hand over to Richard, who's our senior trainer, who will help moderate the overall forum.
Thank you very much, Naringa, and hello everyone. Welcome again to our Erasmus Peace Builders Network Forum. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to each and every one of you wherever you are. As I know that we have so many participants participating from different part of the world with different time zone. This forum is more or less very important because it's coming at a very crucial time that global peace can not be overemphasized as we see so many situations happening around the world which requires us to live in peace and continue to work for peace. So the effort that many young people, many of your organizations, civil society organizations, individuals are doing to consolidate peace around the world is more than ever important. We couldn't count on a better moment in time to bring about this forum to exchange ideas, to dialogue with policymakers, but also key actors in the field of peace building and conflict resolutions to kind of reflect on these different situations. So this forum today, it's going to look at two key important aspects of peace building that we want to focus on. One is peace building in conflict situations and the role that young people play in those contests. And we have brought eminent speakers from different organizations and background who would exchange ideas with us on this area. But also, we would like to hear your opinions and your thoughts through the chats and through the comment sections wherever you're watching to contribute to this dialogue as well. And then the second part of the panel would focus on youth peace and security. As we know, many of you have been great actors in different aspects in your countries, trying to bring about this UN Security Council resolution on youth peace and security. So this second part of the panel would focus very specifically on that, how to unpack this idea, the idea of these resolutions, and going forward, how we can implement and what role each of us can play in this implementation process. So we are very honored and very happy to have each and every one of you here. Just to bring into perspective, this forum is a way of bringing to the peak the series of trainings and workshops that we've been having with our selected Youth Peace Builders Network, those who are part of the Erasmus Peace Builders Network over the last couple of weeks. We've been working, looking at different aspects, building capacity to reinforce the network of peace builders around the world. And we have people participating from the Middle East, from Africa, from Asia, from Europe, and even from the Americas. And we hope that the effort of these young people, including the effort of those of you participating in these sections today, will help to contribute in building sustainable peace in our society. So it's my greatest honor to welcome you today, and I'm looking forward to a very fruitful deliberations. So to get us kick started on the first panel, which will be focusing on peace building in crisis context, I would then give the word to my colleague Joseph Kohn, who would be the key moderator for that panel. Joseph, I pass the word to you.
Yes, thank you very much, and Ringa and Richard for your introduction. And I also would like to say thank you to all the panelists invited and for your kindly acceptance of our invitation for this panel. We will mainly focus. This panel will be mainly focused on how we can work for peace and help and support the civilians and the people in crisis context, and then how to restore the peace in their community in crisis context. So I would like to invite all the panelists to be on screen, and I would like to briefly introduce each of them to the audience. Okay, this is. Thank you very much. This is first and foremost. I would like to introduce Patience. Uh, uh, Patience is from Zimbabwe. She's from Zimbabwe. She's a Rotary Peace Fellow and McGregor University. Thank you very much for joining us. And also, I would like to introduce Shamir Rishat. He's a youth chair of Religion for Peace, founder of Jaded Abidi Foundation. And thank you very much for being with us here. And finally, I would like to introduce Mr. Marshall Stefanik. He's the secretary of the Constitutional IFRC Youth Commission. So we will mainly focus on the youth issue and crisis context and the peace building. Thank you very much. And now I would like to invite, according to our schedule, I would like to invite Mr. Shamir Rishat to share um, about what kind of strategies, sectors, intervention activities that can be done in crisis context to responding to the crisis context, and to help the youth peace works in the context, and how can international youths and international religious institutions support local youths and local religious groups in their local peace works amidst conflict, war, and political and social instability. Thank you, Shami.
Yeah, thank you, Joseph, for that introduction. Thank you, Erasmus Plus Peacebuilding Forum, for this opportunity. I'm humbled to be invited as a panelist to such a rich and experienced panel with Patience and Marcel. To be very honest, I do not have extensive experience on working in the area of violent conflict. I specialize in working with young people, engaging with different stakeholders, in doing policy advocacy and track to diplomacy. But I would like to share some of my experiences of working as a peace builder, youth facilitator, youth worker in the crisis situations that I faced with all of you today. And also talk about, like Joseph said, some of the interventions and best practices I have used in my work in India and Myanmar specifically. I also feel that these practices are can be generalized also and adapted to various regional contexts. So in 2020, riots happened in the northeast part of the capital city of Delhi. Everybody was at risk. Important intervention where I feel young people can and should be involved is the first response. First response is really crucial. I think we all, as peace builders, know that. We responded to the crisis by forming volunteer groups of young people, training them in first response. Further, we also worked on gathering credible information about different stakeholders who could help us, such as CSOs, local groups, and we connected them and tapped into their networks as well, their pre existing networks. So it became very very important because there was a lot of work. We had to figure out where to get the food from, how to fix up the shelter, where could we rescue people from, Where was there a need, where people were hiding, right? How could we transport them? So different stakeholders came together in this time of crisis, wherein some people were providing the food, some people were providing the space to stay, some people were providing the transportation for taking people, and organizing that. Young people were crucial in doing that. All they needed was a little bit of training, little bit of hand holding, which thanks to the facilitators, we as peace builders were able to help them and train them in doing that. And covering such a massive area wouldn't have been possible if it was not for the youth volunteers. Through this experience, I realized how important it was to have a multi-faith youth group working with me. Because working with a team where there were Hindus, where there were Muslims, where there were Christians, and where there were Sikhs, and people of other religions as well, showcased that there are always extremist groups. There are always extremist groups which hamper the rights of vulnerable communities, which attack vulnerable communities. There are dictators who want to dictate terms to vulnerable people and marginalized communities, and represent they do not represent the value systems or belief of an entire community, right? They do not represent everyone. So working with such a youth group really emphasized that fact, and I'm glad to have worked with such a youth group. Also, it further worked to emphasize this fact with the victims of the riot as well. They too slowly over time came to understand this point, that there may be people of different religions, and there are extremists and they are aggressors, but not all people are like that. And I think that is a very important message, that the cycle of hate should not continue. uh, just because there is a crisis, it should not be able to affect the community in such a way that the seeds of hate are sown, and then the cycle of hate continues. As a peace builder, I feel it is important to train and build capacities of young people. I think Erasmus is doing this very effectively, and forums like these are very important to build the capacities of young people so they can work as first responders in situations of crisis. Training them on how to provide psychosocial support, interact with various stakeholders, interpret verbal and non-verbal communication. I think just being human and empathizing with the situation is very important. Also documenting the experiences without being intrusive about the experience. Training them on how to set up a rehabilitation camp, training them on what is needed, how does it function, how can we manage, how can we fundraise, because after a point we need to sustain the effort as well, right? These are some of the core areas that I believe peace builders should focus on. This national experience working in India, it made me question, and I think why is it that we are called builders of peace, or peace builders, right? Why are we always responding to conflict, trying to transform it, right? Why aren't we working on identifying conflict prone areas, and start preemptively working with young people, so that a lot of the time we can address the situation at hand, right? I think we need to be better prepared, and conflict will always be there. I think history is a testament to that. I mean, I think the crisis that is happening right now is a testament to that. And we need to be able to identify these hot zones. We need to be able to prepare young people and peace builders so that they're able to address these situations. um, I personally believe that local wisdom and international experience goes hand in hand. It is important to listen to the local communities, I visited Myanmar in 2018 and interacted with youth from the Rakhine state. And I think building trust was all I did. And talk to them as individuals, as young people, and most importantly, as a friend. It was imperative. I mean, the stories that they had, the experiences that they had, I think just listening was a key skill that I think we all need to develop and have when we're going into a crisis situation. There was a boy who had been rehabilitated. He had been shifted into a camp. He had also moved after being rehabilitated. He had moved back to live with his family in a new sort of resettled locality. But he, the experience that he shared with me, that his father was a military man, and he used to sort of even though it was the crisis situation, he was away from it, but because of the crisis situation, his father used to drink. He turned to alcohol, to substance abuse, and he used to physically abuse the boy. And he shared this with me. So I think there's some things that we think as international peace builders, or coming from a different context. So we might have some expertise in training people or training them to be first responders, but it is important to talk to people, understand the ground reality, understand the situation, understand what is happening. And it is important to have a bottom up peace building process, asking them what do they need, what is the situation like, right? Understanding. And it is most important that we don't find solutions for them, right? It's not about finding solutions for them, it is working with them to find the solutions. I think that is what I would like to share, and I would like to hand it back to Joseph with that. Thank you.
Uh, Thank you very much, Shamir, for sharing your experience and your concern and your uh, expertise in this, how religious communities and youths can work in crisis response work. So, thank you very much. And I would like to here a little bit announce that after this panel discussion from the panelists, we will have questions and answer session for 20 minutes, and I would like to invite all the audience to write comments, asking questions, so that we can pick your questions and respond, and the panelists will respond to your questions. So please take during listening to each of the panelists, please you can write your questions in comments. Thank you very much. And this time, I would like to invite Patience Rosare from Zimbabwe to share about what would be the important sectors for helping civilians and communities in crisis context. When we talk about crisis context, we mean the crisis context like uh, Afghanistan with political instability recently, and now we have Ukraine conditions, and we have Myanmar condition, and we have Syria experience. So, in these kinds of tough, hard situation, how can we help? And what kind of sectors are important uh, that you need to know in their works to build peace in crisis context, and also what kind of sector we need to consider for building and facilitating the resilience of the communities in crisis context, the restoration of peace in the communities, and what would be the role of the civil societies in this struggle amidst crisis of political, social, economic instability and violence.
Thank you so much, Joseph. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Okay. I would want to bring you back to uh, the phases of a conflict, and I would like to start from the latent conflict, where the situation is volatile. There is a distinct crisis potential, but still the situation has not yet escalated. And what kind of peace building approaches do we adopt in this kind of a situation? I would want us to address the issues to do with structural and political causes and the drivers of conflict, while also attempting to prevent the escalation so that it doesn't there's no outbreak of the conflict. Then at instruments that we can use as young peace builders, we need to build the capacity, increase knowledge and skills, and improve the living conditions of the population, and strengthen our capacities and offer incentives for reform. Then thereafter, we get into the phase that Joseph was talking about, the violent conflict stage, where what we're seeing right now in Ukraine. This one, we're talking about an existing conflict which has escalated into a turned violent. So here we're looking at the measures that we can adopt, providing humanitarian assistance to ease human suffering. We can also search for political solutions to end the violence and negotiate for sustainable solutions, and allow communities to experience a peace dividend. We can also talk about NGOs, civil society, working to overcome the social divide and mend the social fabric and achieve long-term transformation. So here, I want us to look at some of the sectors or some of the areas that require uh, peace building in a crisis. Uh, One of the things that comes to mind is the role that youth play in a conflict situation. Amidst violence, there's a lot of disinformation that is rampant, and already you can see since the Ukraine conflict started, there's a lot of misinformation, propaganda, disinformation, and there are approaches that as youth peace builders we can adopt to say people should be informed. We now can use the social media platforms to get the right information to the community, so that even when they make decisions, they make informed decisions on what is happening on the ground. You will notice that most of the conflicts, they are exacerbated by misinformation and propaganda. So I examples which come to mind are the during the Colombia conflict in 2016, 2017. There's a lady called Lina. She's a youth peace builder. She developed La Panga, which is a digital platform that would help map out art-based peace building initiatives across the country. And the goal was to allow peace building organizations to collaborate and coordinate between themselves. And these partnerships were meant to strengthen each initiative. And I'm looking at a network like Erasmus Peace Builder Network, which is bringing about all peace builders across the globe, in Asia, in Africa, in Europe. And this is one of that platform that peace builders can use to uh, uh, create a large impact across the divide. And we also had the Bogo Art. Bogo Art was also a creative means of reconciliation. They would write letters for reconciliation, whereby communities would write to combatants. Right now, we can come up with a statement, or we can write letters either to different governments to say, we are calling for peace. So it's a call for action, and that on its own can bring about an impact within a conflict situation. So these are some of the low-hanging fruits that peace-building organizations can use to bring about peace in different communities. I was also looking at there's need for capacity building. We're looking at enhancing the skills and knowledge of youth peace builders, workshops, trainings, to capacitate them with the knowledge that they need as they approach their projects. The projects are conflict sensitive, they are peace oriented, they understand the nexus between peace and development, which is very important even as they partake in humanitarian assistance, but with that peace building in mind. So I was looking at there's an organization in Nigeria which brings together youth, religious leaders, traditional leaders, and they participate and collaborate in interfaith dialogues, in consultation meetings, in conflict transformation workshops. And these youth and other stakeholders are imbibed with the knowledge and the attitude and skills for interfaith dialogue and conflict transformation. Because when we're talking about peace, there is negative peace and there is positive peace. And when we're talking about negative peace, this is the absence of war, but there are areas or countries which are experiencing absence of war but very high negative peace, to say there are high tensions. So we need also to transform the behaviors and attitude, and we start talking about positive peace. With positive peace, we're addressing the structures, the institutions, and the behaviors. And to do that, we need to have knowledge and skills and understanding of the underlying causes of conflict within that region. And so this is another approach that youth peace builders can adopt, and civil society can promote, to say they need to capacitate youths in different societies. There's also need to strengthen youth leadership. Most of the time when you talk about youth and their role in peace, people always want to bring back how the youth bulge and how youth are used to promote political violence, how youth are susceptible as the engineers of violence itself. But there is a peace dividend of having youths as the agents for change, the agents for peace building. And it's high time governments and the international community realize the role that youth have to play when it comes to peace building. And to do that, we need to strengthen youth leadership. In Congo, in DRC, they have tried to use that sectoral approach. And there's an organization which aims to build the leadership capacities of young people through specialized training in non-violence and reconciliation. As of now, it is about recruited 120,000 volunteers in about 120 chapters. And it has enabled youth to be engaged in their communities to promote the culture of tolerance and dialogue. Like my colleague Shamia was saying before, it's important to involve and implement our projects with the communities. A bottom to top approach is very important when we are talking about peace building, because the communities knows what is it that they need. So grassroots focused peace building efforts in communities, they drive they're transformative in nature, as they tend to address the exact needs and the underlying causes of conflict, rather than the imposed elite level peace building processes. So it's very important to have the youths within the structures of the communities, as they can be able to drive the dialogue, to drive the development in their area, as well as to get their communities out of conflict. So you will see these organizations, it has helped train youth leaders across the DRC, and thereby it's strengthening youth leadership. Then the other important sector that needs to be worked on is building intergenerational partnerships. you will see that tensions between old people and young people have been at the core of emerging movements. So the need for peace building organizations is to promote healthy intergenerational dialogues in which stereotypes and prejudices against youth are addressed. I talked about one of the stereotypes that youths are being used to exacerbate or to promote violence. This is one of the stereotypes which needs to be addressed by these intergenerational partnerships. And so taking into consideration the existing gaps of peace building knowledge between the young and the old, the urban and the rural communities, the literate and the illiterate communities, it is crucial that peace building organizations, they design adequate methodologies that promote effective induction of all in such intergenerational peace building processes. So that's another area which needs to be we can put our efforts on as civil society. We can explore and get to work our projects on. Then the other one, the other area is to mobilize dialogue mobilization through the use of social media or technology. So the use of technology or social media between warring parties is very important. As one, it gets to give people a public sphere or a platform to talk about different issues that are affecting them. And as a peace expert, I've been exploring that mechanism and trying to have a media which is youth friendly, which gives youth a platform to talk about issues which are affecting their communities. So here, it's not just the media which is promoting peace, but the medium is the media, but the people who are driving that, these are the youths. So the programming has to be youth centered, and we're talking about using the media as a early warning system, using the media as a public space where the community can congregate. It's difficult to reach people in different communities, but nowadays, because of social media, because of Facebook, because of Instagram, TikTok, we can utilize those mediums to communicate with different people in a certain area. And I was looking at the Syrian conflict. If you go on their Facebook pages and Instagram, if you follow that, you will see that there's the level of hate it's on a high level, and racism, there's so much racism among community components. So when we realize that this is happening, how then can we come in and offer activities and initiatives that can propel these warring parties to come together and talk about issues that are affecting them? So we can have different challenges that we can adopt as civil societies, and these hashtags to optimize our reach. We can call for different campaigns. I was looking at how Cambodia managed to address issues to do with domestic violence by using a helmet campaign. It was a orange helmet campaign, whereby a woman, as they get into their homestead, they wear that helmet to signify that the home is not a safe place because of gender-based violence. So we can use such short videos even on social media to call the world's attention to different conflicts in our area, so that we get the international community to know what is happening in different communities which are undergoing conflict and crisis. Then lastly, I would want us to look at the grassroots focused peace building efforts. How can we get communities to dialogue even during a crisis? We're looking at peace committees. We can establish peace committees within our communities, and we choose different leaderships. Looking at the conflict in Nigeria, which is religious-based, where we can have different peace committees and interfaith dialogues come together, and they manage to set the basis for peace building, for talking, for getting the discussion ongoing, because this is what's important in any conflict, to have a level-headed talk about what is happening. So these are some of the issues that I think we can work on, we can address as we go through different phases of conflict. So despite the challenging nature of conflict, youth peace builders show great navigational skills to repair damaged community relationships through creative and innovative initiatives. And I think with those few examples for today, I would want to thank you all for listening, for coming on the Erasmus Peace Building Network Forum, as we talk about how youths can be part and parcel of peace building in conflict crisis. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Patience, for your discussion around you working on different phases of the conflicts and what to do in what we can do in violent conflicts, especially the youths, what the youth can do. So, thank you very much for your sharing. And we also are expecting questions and answer at the comment. So, the audience, please, you can just uh, raise questions directly addressing to the different panelists, or you can also just ask just generally, general questions. So thank you very much. And we are now. I would like to invite Mr. Marcel Stefanik for sharing, because he has been active in youth humanitarian works so much. So I would like to him to concentrate upon how young people in humanitarian action can be activated, and what are the role of youth in humanitarian work, how are their positions in humanitarian work, whether they are excluded or included by international humanitarian organizations, and and please also share us the experience of your humanitarian works and the challenges of humanitarian work in crisis contexts around the world. And okay, if please provide us the general overview of non-government humanitarian intervention approaches and possible pathways for humanitarian works in crisis contexts. Thank you very much, Mr. Marcel. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Joseph. I would like to be using my presentation. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for the invitation. It is my honor and pleasure to be joining Shamir and Patience and having the opportunity to speak to the wide audience of peace builders, whom I understand have a very diverse and rich experience. My contribution will focus on a brief overview of the Compact for Young People in Humanitarian Action, that is a global platform co-led and coordinated by the International Federation of Red Crescent Societies and the UNFPA. I will try to be brief and succinct so that we may embark on a more like an interactive exchange and question-answer sessions, not only limited to the current conflict in Ukraine, but also on the conflict resolution and peace building and culture of nonviolence and peace in general. So my name is Marcel, as I mentioned, and I'm representing the International Federation of Red Crescent Societies, and I believe that many of you have experienced the services and programs or witnessed them in across 192 countries. Today, let's go to the next slide. Today, I'm representing the Federation, but also, as I mentioned, the Compact for Young People in Humanitarian Action. So basically over 60 organizations that have gathered on the occasion of World Humanitarian Summit in 2016. And it's a platform of organizations that are like-minded when it comes to youth engagement. Just to pick up a few of the big players that are known, I believe, to everybody. The members of the compact are UNHCR, UNICEF, Red Cross, Red Crescent, then the Broad Scouts, and also we have some grassroots organizations that are working with young people. And also we have the UN Major Group of Children and Youth, who is basically the umbrella organizations for youth-led organizations and their contribution to the compact. As I said, we have over 60 members. And if we go to the next slide, you will see that basically the compact for young people in humanitarian action is mainly aiming for transformation of humanitarian aid and the infrastructure for and with young people. There are 5 key actions, five key commitments that every member who joined the compact is, like committing to live up to in their institution, and also to make them happen when it comes to engaging young people. If we go through the next slide, we will have a bit of a insight on the content of this unprecedented platform, because of it has never been so that so many organizations would come together and basically commit to basically changing the world for children, adults, and young adults for better with them, while actually recognizing their rights, specific needs, but also strengths. The first commitment of every member of the compact speaks to the service delivery. And here I leave you to read the text yourself. I just will kind of highlight that every organization in the compact and the compact as a collective is really advocating for age and the developmentally gender-specific programming that is targeting the constituency of children, adolescents, and young adults. The second commitment to which the member organizations, next slide please, have committed is headed participation, which you of course may understand also as young people participating in decision-making processes of whatever program services that are of their concern or where they are a stakeholder. This is about basically having a say and activating young people's agency. When we move ahead, we have heard Shamir and also Patience speak about intergenerational dialogue. So on the next slide, we will see the next commitment of the compact is about capacity and local action. So here we talk about youth-led and adult-owned initiatives, programs, and etc. So it's really about the intergenerational dialogue in creating a better world. Then on the next slide, we are going to see that every member of the compact platform, the next slide, yes, has committed to increase their accountability to the constituency of children, adolescents, and young adults, and also to invest resources, which are not necessarily only the financial resources, to basically, to improve the lives of children, youth, and adolescents who are affected or caught in the midst of humanitarian crisis. Now you can see that here we also are mentioning specific situations like conflict and displacement that has been, that has become to the top of the headlines in the recent weeks. And the last fifth commitment of all of the members of the compact is about data and knowledge. And it speaks to the basically in 2016 identified a long-lasting gap in data and evidence about the needs, rights, and strengths of young people in the humanitarian settings. So how can we somehow, as organizations, be good at making the life of children, adolescents, and young adults good if we don't really understand what is their current situation by actually asking them? This is the overview of the 5 key commitments of the compact that I also basically represent here today as the co-lead of the secretariat, where I am working very closely with my very dear colleague Daniele Engel from the UNFPA. Now I would like to continue and spend the time on diving a little bit into the linkages between the compact and peace building and peace and nonviolence and culture of nonviolence and peace. But I believe that by now I have somehow managed to outline that, for everybody who is out there, that there is a platform and there are standards, there are internationally recognized approaches that somehow we still are on the slide back, please. Slide back, please. So that we are basically, living in the world where we have internationally recognized approaches to engaging children, adolescents, and young adults who are caught in the midst of humanitarian crises. So I believe that the compact with its resources and specific members can really serve as a platform for like-minded, for which or to which you also as peace builders can reach out to for help, like advocacy materials, advocacy resources, and to kind of know that in these member organizations of the compact you have your allies. Now, I hope that it is established that basically you would be reaching out and speaking with, engaging with the like-minded, and you wouldn't have to convince them. Now I would like to basically continue to establish the connections between the compact and the peace building work. And in the next slides and the next minutes, I will speak about nonviolence and peace, youth engagement, Red Cross, Red Crescent mandate, humanitarian aid, and developmental aid. As you can see on this slide, in the Red Cross, Red Crescent, we are investing, and we have been investing for decades into meaningful youth engagement, because we believe that stronger youth engagement strengthens national societies and their programs and services. National societies are basically the units that are across the world in each country, providing the humanitarian Red Cross, Red Crescent service. And we believe that through strengthening the national societies and the programs and services, we are also strengthening the community resilience. Because the national societies are staying and are in the communities before, during, and after whatever crises and disasters. So that enables us not to only basically carry out the work along the humanitarian aid, but also along the developmental stream. And basically, we know that the resilience of communities or individuals is really powerful when the help and developmental possibilities are taking place in the peaceful context. So if you can see the picture on the right, it's a kind of like a line, let's call it a bridge, which basically features three pillars for us to make you understand the concept of resilience that we apply. The first pillar is humanitarian aid in crises and conflicts and disasters, etc. Then the second might be called the developmental aid. The size is not proportional to the meaning of the pillar or the element. The developmental aid allows us to basically invest into preparation, and it's a long-term approach to prevention and mitigation and response. And basically then the last one is the peace and nonviolence, and the culture of peace and nonviolence. So the bridge of resilience is as strong as all these three pillars are strong. And we see the resilience of communities and individuals as the ability to bounce back. So we all understand, and now diving even further to the pillar, which is about peace and nonviolence, if that pillar is not really strong and solid and well represented, then it means that the ability to bounce back, either individual or community, is really hampered. If we move ahead to the next slide, I would like to introduce just briefly, so what is guiding our approach? So now we understand that the peace and nonviolence and the culture of these two values is important to our work, but what guides us in it? It's the principle of impartiality, neutrality, and independence. And the picture speaks for themselves, but oftentimes principles can be seen as, very dry or very high level. And if you go to the next slide, it is a slide that demonstrates how the principles that we have seven of them, but I just like try to focus on the three that are important for the context of building the culture of peace and nonviolence, how they translate to what is their meaning, then what is their interpersonal and intrapersonal skills that speak to them. So basically, this is like, a slide that bridges the theoretical framework of our principles with what does it mean in real life. So when we speak that we are working impartially, neutral, independent, it means that we are working with empathy, active listening, critical thinking, and non-judgment, which also have been mentioned in the speeches of Shamir and Patience, nonviolent communication, collaborative negotiations, mediation, and personal resilience. If we go to the next slide, you will see that there is, just for the brevity, the pillars of principles, pillars of humanitarian values, and then the behaviors and the skills that I have just mentioned, so that you can have it for the brevity and legibility on your screen. So this is how we, in the last column on the behaviors, identify what does it mean to be working towards the culture of peace and nonviolence. What does it take to have empathy, active listening, etc. If we move ahead, and I'm going to be concluding the presentation soon, we have all of this conceptual understanding that is basically the foundation of the Youth as Agents of Behavioral Change program, YABC, that was started in 2008. It is from bottom up, bottom top build initiative that is a flagship of the Red Cross National Societies in promotion of culture of nonviolence and peace. Basically, it's a program that is extremely, interesting because it starts and builds on the individual and basically is really bypassing the cognitive, structures in our mind. It starts with the own transformation that is then basically, conveyed to the communities. It's a very, so basically the entry point to individual's transformation is not the cognition, it's more about the emotion. If you go to the next slide, you will see that in this program, you ask me, but Marcel, what do you really do? How do you really, as a peace builder, how can you enrich your file, enrich your portfolio, enrich your, activities, projects, youth-led projects? How can we in our organization, make it happen that we are scaling up our work? And for me, it always speaks to, you want youth-led action. And for me, it speaks to topics and the themes that I believe, in our context at least, in our organizations, are linked to the peace and culture of nonviolence. And in this YABC program, you can find thematic issues like non-discrimination, intercultural dialogue, social inclusion, gender equity and sexually gender-based violence, violence prevention, mitigation, response, and international humanitarian law. The last one, of course, obviously, would come as a legal framework, very relevant for the conflict in Ukraine. But basically, all of these are thematics or themes that really help us create more peaceful and non-violent communities and world. And basically, they are cross-referenced for or with the intra and interpersonal skills, which we saw on the slides before. And here I just want to put it out there. Look at the number 13. It's really about the inner peace. It's Qigong, yoga, breathing, relaxation, and meditation techniques, which are, arts and sports are really activities that, contribute to peace building. The next slide would just help you see that how the toolkit is organized. So you can basically see the activities and for which thematic issue and for which skill you can use them. So it's a very nice and helpful overview of a very thick, rich manual. And we continue to the next slide. This is just what I wanted to share with you. I don't know if you are aware. The resources that I recommend, it's the ifrc.org, then the www.youthcompact.org, that's the Compact for Young People in Humanitarian Action. Then it's the network, it's a united network of youth peace builders, a very helpful website. They are also a member of the Compact. And then the International Peace Institute, again, organization that is also a member of the Compact and specifically works on the peace-related issues. And then I believe my last slide is expressing my gratitude and thanks for this invitation. And I look forward to exchanging ideas with you and fellow panelists. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Marcel, for your sharing your experience and the thematic area. Lots of information and inputs that we can get from here, your presentation, and this will really help youth across the world and the audience here to reflect upon their work and to map their future programming. So thank you very much, very much appreciated. Thank you very much. And I am looking into some of the questions and the comment. One of the participants asked whether they can get the slide through email. So I think if you are a registered participant, we can send you uh, the documents to you via email. And one of the I So now I'm checking the questions at the comment. So from Joanne, I can read all the questions here. Uh, okay, Joanne asked about when engaging young people in the themes and interpersonal skills, do you believe that one should be focused on before the other? So I think this question is uh, addressed to the Marcel.
Yeah,
So yeah.
thank you. So basically, the way how the YABC is built and tested in various cultures and contexts is that, for example, you have activity that is called car park, that is, let's say, about one or two interpersonal skills, but also speaks to the theme of, let's say, discrimination. So it's not that you focus either or. So also the matrix that I briefly showed on how the activities are clustered gives you an understanding. So you can basically also work backwards. For example, if you are in a group or let's say in a school, we don't have to talk about major scale crisis. If you are in a school or your peer group and you have a problem with like empathy and active listening that are causing problems, and it links to, for example, the position of girls in your classroom or in your group, then you look at basically the matrix, and you will look up the interpersonal skills and the topic of gender, and you will see, okay, I can do activities 1 to 4. Basically, you choose the one which is most appropriate for you, maybe based on the time that is required, preparation required, or even debriefing required. Because of course, it can be a rather, important topic, and you also want to be prepared for, the things bubbling up. So I think you can also decide which level of the activity you would like to organize. I hope that answers.
Okay, and I have provided his email at the comment, and you can also directly write to Mr. Marcel for his PowerPoint slides. And one of the questions from me is uh, crisis context is it's difficult to uh, foresee, and what kind of youth preparation work would be essential for pre-crisis planning and preparation, and to be able to respond to the crisis when it comes to in the, on their face. So, what kind of preparation should international youth organization do? Do you think? I would like to ask all. So, Mr. Shamir, will you go ahead?
Sure, Joseph. Am I audible? Okay, great. Thank you. So I think identification is, primary concern, and you're asking post-identification what steps one should take. I think network building, training, and capacity building. Marcel with that amazing presentation, and Patience has also talked about how networks can be built, how capacities can be built. And I think most importantly, building the network from the ground up. I think that is very important. Having the multicultural element is very important. Connecting with CSOs, NGOs, and I think INGOs, especially international organizations, they need to invest more and more into youth networks and intergenerational dialogue. I think a lot of the times we have these even though RFP is doing a lot in terms of developing youth leaders, but I think we need to also put the budgets behind that as well, have more trainings, have more people working in this area, and do more, because young people, a lot of the times people say that young people are the future, right? And I think that's a very famous saying, but I think young people are the present. They are they're not, it's not just the potential, right? It is what they can do now, and they can be very helpful and effective in crisis context, in situations of crisis and context now. So really building that network, training and capacity building, and having a strong team, right, to handle situations. I think that is essential, because the better trained the team is in handling certain crisis situations, they will be more and more effective the more confident they are, because a lot of the times young people want to do things, but they need that support and that guidance from mentors, and really need some more time to come into their own, right? So that is really essential. I think more resources to young people. Yeah.
So, Ms. Patient, would you like please also respond to this question?
Okay, I wanted to add on to what Shamia was talking about. When you talk to a lot of youth organization, they have brilliant ideas. They already have the frameworks, the approach, and everything. But I think what has been lacking has been support and financial support from international organizations, from donor funding, and all. And at times they are told that their projects they're not. Uh, feasible, but the ideas are great, and when they do implement, that's when you get to see how these ideas are speaking to different communities. So in terms of the ideas and the framework, the youths, they have it. They understand what is it that's supposed to do in a crisis context. But now it the major challenge comes from the funding. They don't have access to international organizations who can bankroll their ideas. Then secondly, I think there is also need for JC, gender equality and social inclusion, to be adopted even through peace building programs. And this is what has been lacking in most of the projects. To say peace building has been taken as a standalone field, but there's need to create that nexus, like Marcel was pointing out, the issues to do with age, to do with gender, even as we work on our frameworks, our peace frameworks. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Patience. And Mr. Marcel, can you please
Yes.
respond to this question, and also about, especially for humanitarian work, what kind of
Yeah.
preparation would youth needs locally and internationally?
Yes. So thank you very much. Let me start by picking up on Patience and then Shamir. Funding is, an issue, and oftentimes we hear that from local branches at the grassroots level, local youth groups. At the same time, being a volunteer in the past, because I'm rather old, but I've been volunteering for over like 20 years at the local branch level. And I know that what I needed was just to mobilize young people and basically, a place where we could meet. And basically we started a program in the kindergartens, which is now nationwide for like 10 years. So what I'm trying to demonstrate is that oftentimes it's not the money that young people need. Oftentimes it's other resources, it's the political will, it's the support for their projects, for their ideas, which I believe it doesn't necessarily have to be measured only with money. Of course, money is needed, but I also believe that we have to change the way how we think about the resources and how we convince those who do not basically are our like-minded. So, for example, I can tell you that the United Network of Young Peace Builders had its annual retreat recently, and it was online. And basically, they identified that, okay, we have to change our ways of thinking and link our peace building activities to climate change and climate crisis. Because actually, and that like requires the change of the narrative and thinking that, yes, of course, climate crisis, it's really a fight for resources. It's about access to resources, ability to move somewhere. So, here we go, peace builders. So it's like really trying to use the momentum, for example, of, like the crisis when it comes to climate and the funding channel there, and to start reasoning that, hey, we have as peace builders, a contribution that we are making here. So I think that I will finish there because I know that the funding is a rather touchy subject, but I hope that I was critical and contributing as opposed to reinforcing and emulating the stereotype of adult people saying young people don't need money. It's not true. But I hope my message was possible to receive and it came across. Now, when it comes to the preparation of what is needed, I will say very briefly, because I believe that we don't have so much time, but I want to say young people, even during the COVID crisis, many people were labeling them as irresponsible, etc., very negative stigma and prejudice and stigmatization, discrimination, etc. What I feel is that we have to make more effort in elevating young people who are the positive examples of change, and they are the ones on the front lines. Young people can and do play a role in creating the culture of nonviolence and peace. They can be great agents. And I think that organizations, either if you speak of a adult-led or youth-led organization, I believe that they have to think of the competency that young people need for whatever projects in peace building they basically have to be engaging or are co-creating. The competency is not enough. You have to think about empowerment. And the third E is the enabling environment, which basically requires you, or is an imperative for you as an organization, to change yourself from within to become fit for engaging young people whom you want to work in the peace building area or nonviolence and peace themes. I think that everybody who engages young people, and in peace building specifically, has the duty of care and protection. And not only physical, but also, like mental, emotional, etc. Thinking about possible consequences, what involving young people in this type of work requires. So, and the last piece I want to say, we have to together, and I believe it's also the role of young peace builders in the call, in the audience, to basically call for A, B, C, D. Like, for example, the 5 commitments of the compact. You will not be alone if you are starting asking for that as a kind of like, foundation or a springboard for whatever you want to achieve as a kind of like minimal standard. And I believe that we have to also call for demystification, detabooing of peace building, because it's such a huge word. Like, can you believe that you can really create a culture of nonviolence and peace with a poem or with a sport, with a football match? Can you? Of course you can. But I give you just a quick example. In one of the national societies on the African continent, there were areas that they call slums, very dangerous for everybody, even for children living there, who are usually left alone on their own. The Red Cross branch of the National Society identified that as like a problem. But, they wanted to do activities in that area of slum. No, we cannot. We cannot. It's a duty of care. So what they did, they used their connections in the slum and made a football match near the local branch where it was safe. And that was how they somehow helped release the tensions between the communities in the slum and the communities outside of the slum through engaging young people. So I think there are examples which can help us demystify peace building. And we have to really challenge ourselves to not speak in the, silver or like ivory tower language, UN talk, but really to kind of empower people to understand that they themselves, by what they do, how they act, how they kind of speak with their friends, how they mobilize, they can do a lot in changing the culture of nonviolence and peace, or nurturing it. So that would be the last element after the 3 E's: education, empowerment, enabling environment. I would call that we also have to demystify peace building, so that we don't scare people away from doing great things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcel and Shamir and Patience. We have only one last question that's quite important, I think. And due to the time limitation, you will have 30 seconds of each to respond to the question. And this question is, how can we help? How can international youth community help those youth activists and peace builders and humanitarian workers in crisis context currently? So how can we take action as international youth communities to help the youths in the local youth in crisis context? So just 30 minutes for each. Thank you very much.
Sure. I'll just go first, since that's the order we're following. So, I think understanding the conflict, understanding the crisis, talking to people on the ground is the most important thing for international youth. A lot of the times, there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation that is spreading, and you see something on Instagram, you see something on Facebook, and you need to do your research before forming an opinion, before you know uh, uh, you need to understand the issue first, and also raising a voice. It's very important. You are sitting, right now, as young people, we need to stand with the people of Ukraine. We need to stand with them. We need to raise a voice for them, and what nations are not doing, what international organizations are not doing. We need to raise a voice for the voiceless. We need to really show our support and solidarity. And I think that is very important in any crisis, in any conflict, right? What the international community is not doing, maybe because of some diplomatic reason or the other, but we need to do as young people, as activists, and as people and humanitarians. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Miss Patience, will you chime in?
Thank you so much. Shamia, I wanted to finish all the points. Okay, maybe also to add on to what Shamia was saying, there is need to collaborate, the international community or international organizations to collaborate with a community-based organization. And these are the people on the ground. They know that what is it that they need. They also understand how tailor-made solutions to their problems. So it's important to give them the platform or the leeway to come up with solutions to their own problems than to uh, give them the solutions, because conflict is not a one size fit all, and there are different it's a complex situation. So it's important to allow the communities to develop the solutions for their own problems, so at the end of the day they own that, there's local ownership to that peace building. Thus it will create lasting peace. Thank you.
And Mr. Masi, thank you very much. We have now, in crisis context, we have refugees, IDPs, and we have food security and shelters problems. So, what can international youths immediately help those youths in activists and helping communities in crisis context?
I will say, knowing yourself is very important. Find organizations that are already established and find a way how you can bring the value. And I would say the quote, like the 4 words: think globally and act locally. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, all the panelists, for being with us tonight for over an hour. So thank you very much. We hope to see you in person in the future, and also the audience, and we will meet some time in the future in our peace works across the world. And thank you every participants. And finally, I have an activity that is. We will post a Mentimeter link in YouTube as comment, and you can get into the link and answer the questions. We will have. Okay, I will share my screen. Uh, so our first our first question is what is your personal solidarity statement for young peace builders striving for peace in crisis context? And the second question is that what message do you want to convey to the international institutions and global youths to help the peace works of young peace builders in crisis context? So this is the two questions, and that will be the link to respond to these questions will be the link to respond to these questions will be in YouTube comment, and all participants are invited to respond to the link, and you can respond to the link multiple times. So thank you very much, all the panelists and all the participants, and thank you very much for thank you very much to the Erasmus Peace Builders Networks for preparing this platform and giving us the chance to meet each other now. And I believe that they will prepare more pathways for us to meet and work together for peace and help our community in crisis in the future onwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Peace to all.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, all the panelists and the participants. And now I would like to um, hand over to Mr. Richard to take time and to continue the continue proceedings onwards. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you so much, Joseph, and thank you to each of the panelists, even though they are not online anymore. I hope you hear me, and thank you for this wonderful sharing that you have brought, bringing the different perspective or on the questions that we are discussing, peace building in crisis context. I can say that you have done really good justice to the thematics, and I hope that we have been able to acquire a lot of knowledge and some suggestions or tools that could help us as we prepare in our various contexts to respond to the different issues that we are facing. I really like the different points that they had raised and how they concluded with the key suggestions on how we can be helpful to young people who are working in humanitarian and crisis contexts. So I'm looking forward to the actions that each of you take in your various community. And thank you so much, Joseph, for coordinating the dialogue. As we said earlier, we're going to have two panels, so it's not yet the end. We would have 5 minutes break just for you to go grab coffee if you do not have your coffee close by yet, or tea or whatever, some drink. And then we will be back in 5 minutes to start the second panel, which will focus on youth, peace, and security. So I'm looking forward to having you. Hello again. Welcome back, everyone, and thank you for staying back with us. And thank you to our colleague Saki for the wonderful music which has kept us during the break. We would be going straight ahead to the second part of the our forum today, which will focus on youth, peace, and security. As you know, this is one of the UN Security Council resolutions that focus more on the agencies of young people as active and strong contributor to peace building processes around the world, not only recognizing their effort and contribution, but seeing them as a co-partner in fostering peace around the world. So it's my honor and my pleasure to welcome you back on this panel, and to welcome on stage my colleague Romera, who will be moderating this panel to present our speaker for this afternoon. Romera, you have the word.
Thank you so much, Richard, and everyone who is joining online. It's really a pleasure to continue with a very interesting second panel. And of course, thank you for the colleagues who joined for the first panel. Very insightful also on how we connect the whole peace building agenda with the humanitarian and crisis response context. So for this panel, we will be focusing on unpacking this youth, peace, and security agenda, and really traveling a little bit through time, understanding where is this agenda and the different resolution, Richard, that you mentioned, where are they coming from, and then seeing what's currently happening from global, regional, national, and local level, and then ending the panel with some critical question to our guest speaker today to see how do we actually move forward, which are the key priorities into the acceleration of the implementation of the youth peace and security agenda. So before going straight into the discussion and the presentation, I also would like to invite our 5 guest speakers from today online. So welcome so much to Ludmila from UNOY Peace Builders, to Mina from Search for Common Ground, to Rosario Millennial Movement, to Allwell from Building Blocks for Peace, and Vera, of course, from Piece of Art. So very warm welcome to each of you. I know, as we have been mentioning, very different time zones. Some of you are joining from Latin America, some others from the Americas in general, actually, but also from Europe, from the Middle East, from Africa. So thank you so much for being with us today. I trust it's going to be very insightful and critical conversation, as it was already mentioned in the panel before. We are in very critical moments in different parts of the world, experiencing the outreach and the start of some violent conflict, the continuation in another context. So I think it's also very critical that we have this conversation right now. So without further delay, I would like to invite Ludmila Andrade, who is from a Brazilian background and who is joining today as the lead network for UNOY Peacebuilders. So UNOY Peacebuilders is a global network of youth-led organization working on peace building, but also conflict transformation, and that has been a key actor in pushing and advocating the youth peace and security agenda. And I know Ludmila in particular has been very much involved since the beginning, being part of all this lobbying and advocacy effort for the youth peace and security agenda. So we are very glad to have you, Ludmila, today with us. Thank you for accepting the invitation. And maybe to have like a first question to you, if you would like to bring us a little bit to when I was saying we will travel in time. So where is this actually youth peace and security agenda coming from? What was the role of young people to pushing and to see the UN Security Council adopting resolution around youth peace and security? So the floor is yours, Ludmila, to give us some insight on that past of the youth peace and security agenda. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Romerau. It's a pleasure to be here with so many friends as well, sharing this space. So yeah, I'm Ludmila, the lead network at UNOY Peacebuilders. And I'd like to introduce UNOY a little bit. We are currently a network of 130 members in more than 70 countries. All of our members are youth-led, and they're all contributing to peace in different ways. And I really like to think about the UNOY network as a microcosm of the whole YPS world, because within our membership, we have such a great diversity of regions and contexts, from really active conflict to more peaceful ones. Also in scope, from really grassroots organization to really global organizations. We also have a huge diversity in topics, from peace education, active citizenship, intergenerational, interreligious and intercultural dialogue, mediation, PVE, CVE, and finally a whole array of different approaches, from capacity building, advocacy, sports and culture, etc. So we really see within the UNOY network such a huge diversity. And coming from this point from UNOY, we were initially founded in '89, and in around 2007 we became a membership-based network. And within UNOY, we always saw the agency, the resilience, the strength of young people in preventing violence and building peace in their community. But we saw that there was a huge difference between what we saw in our experience and the discourse that was surrounding young people in conflict. The old discourse that we already know, young people either as victims or perpetrators, especially young women as victims and young men as perpetrators. And we really saw that there was the need to challenge this and to create the foundations for cooperation between non-youth policymakers, decision makers, and young people that were already contributing to peace in their communities. And that's when the idea of the Security Council resolution came from, very much inspired by the Women, Peace and Security agenda that was around even before the YPS agenda. So inspired by that, we started our advocacy efforts. We partnered with other civil society organizations that worked with young people, also some UN agencies, to start this conversation, especially in New York. And a lot of our strategy came from our youth advocacy teams. So it's young people that were active on their community, but that also understood the importance of international policy framework. So then they could make these connections between that there was this huge gap. So I would coordinate their attendance to different events, to talk to as many policymakers they could, really knocking on doors, talking to anybody who was interested in talking to them. Some of them quite curious why all of these young people what they were doing in New York in the UN. Some of them more accepting, and some of them completely discreditable of the power of young people. But the truth is that within this intergenerational coalition, more and more attention and more support is started to gather until the Security Council resolution started to seem more and more possible. And it started to really take shape. We found some champion countries that were willing to take this forward. And after the global forum on youth, peace and security held in Jordan in 2015, it was just a jump for the adoption of the resolution in 2015. So already quite a while back. And when 2250 was adopted, there was kind of a big feeling of, now what? We were focused on it for so long that when it was adopted, we were like, okay, what do we do now? And within NOI, we really saw the need for building, raising awareness of member states, civil society, intergovernmental organizations, that this resolution existed and that it needed to be implemented. And that's when maybe working on the UN level didn't make that much sense for us anymore as intensively. And then we started strategizing on how to make it trickle down. And that's when regional advocacy teams were formed. First, the European one in 2016, focusing primarily in the European Union and in the Council of Europe. And then in the following year, the African Youth Advocacy Team, focusing on the African Union. And what we have seen with now 5 years of the work of these advocacy teams is that this is working. This methodology is working, of bringing young people, facilitating this space between young people and policymakers. They understand not just the contributions that young people make, but also the challenges that they face, the need that they have to have their work supported and recognized in their community. So it has been a really positive developments since then. And throughout all of these, the advocacy teams, etc., we also had other important developments that included the adoption of new resolutions on the topic. The resolution 2419 was adopted in 2018, and it really focused on youth participation in peace processes. And in 2020, we had a third resolution adopted that provides some accountability for the agenda, with a biannual reporting on the development of the youth, peace and security agenda. Other things also developed. We had the publication of the progress study, The Missing Piece, that it's really a masterpiece that was carried out with so much participatory consultation with young people. We had regional consultations, thematic, national. It was really a big commitment from the author and the team that supported him, that really outlines how young people are working for peace. What are those challenges? What are their needs? How young people see peace? And I think what I really like about it is there is a vision of peace that is in the progress study, and it's the one that it's put forward by young people, that it's very holistic, very cross-cutting. It comes from huge regional conflicts, but it also comes to the level of the individual, of I want to feel safe within my community. I want to feel safe doing the work I do, of carrying out the gender, of sexual identity that I carry, being a member of a certain minority. So it's something that really speaks on a very human level, that sometimes when we talk about on a very policy level, we miss a little bit, because we talk so much about institutions and about the state. And more recently, we also had just last month the Doha conference, that we also had this space for the launch of 2 important resources. The first one is a 5-year strategic plan on youth inclusive peace processes, and the other is a guide for public officials working on the national implementation. So really for bureaucrats to also make sure that it doesn't stay on this really high level ministries, etc., that it's important, but sometimes who is really gonna get things done is more local level administrations or or bureaucrats. We also had national action plans that were adopted in Nigeria, in Finland. So a lot of important developments really going from the global until the national level. And one thing that UNOY also has been doing since 2015 is trying to support young people who are not necessarily part of our network, who are not necessarily in our direct zone of influence, in our direct constituency, to start working on youth peace and security, or to improve their work through publications. So since then, we have published toolkits on 2250, introduction, what is the agenda, why it matters, and what can you and your community start doing to work on this. We also created a coalition guide for building intergenerational coalitions, since we've saw that it was so positive in the case of the global coalition on YPS. And we do see a lot of regional coalitions now being created, some national ones. So it's been a lot of positive developments in this sense. And I think I will really finalize my reflection by saying that I think that the YPS community and agenda, it's so dynamic. It's changing. We also have a lot of people coming and going because of the age aspect of it. And I think that 2250 was super important. I think it was really a huge milestone, and the other subsequent policy frameworks and other commitments, but they are not the youth peace and security agenda. For me, the youth peace and security agenda is whenever there is one person trying to prevent violence, trying to build sustainable peace in their community. So I think we need to make an effort to create these spaces where young people as regarded as equal and essential partners for peace, and where we find a common language between the more traditional stakeholders and young people. And I would be very careful to not expecting young people to simply learn the policymakers' language. They also need to make an effort to learn our language, to communicate how we communicate, and to understand how we operate, and understand that we might operate in different ways, but they are complementary and they have to support each other and not compete to each other, and that they have values that cannot substitute, one cannot substitute the other. So I think that the magic really happens when we have this commitment to work jointly, to be inclusive, and to treat each other as partners. This is for me where the magic happens, and not just dragging youth to a bunch of high-level fora and speaking really nice speeches, because there is a place and a time for that. But there's also the place and time to understand what young people is doing on the ground, the most grassroots, the most underfunded, and the bravest, the riskiest work that's being done, because for me, that's really the core of the youth peace and security. I will stop for now, but I'm happy to also address questions later.
Thank you so much, Ludmila. I think that was really insightful, and I would definitely highlight the last part you mentioned right now. No, how can young people, youth groups also complement each other with the work of other stakeholders, from can be national, local authorities, governments, I don't know, private sector, academia, etc. So how do we not only bring young people to those spheres of influence, but how do also these actors can go to the areas of where young people are working and really pushing this agenda on youth peace and security. So thank you for mentioning. I think it was also, you already touched on a few things that will be complemented and will be further detailed through our other guest speakers. So without further delay, I would like first to give the floor to my fellow colleague and friend Saki, who will be co-facilitating with me. So Saki, the floor is yours now for introducing the next guest speaker. Thank you, Saki.
Thank you, Rom. I hope everyone hears me. And hello, everyone. I'm happy to introduce Mina Ayazi, a young peace builder with experience in organizing diaspora and youth advocates for peace and justice. She is currently a program officer for Children and Youth Division at Search for Common Ground, where she supports Search's global and US-based youth peace and security portfolio. Her focuses within YPS include advocacy, YPS programming, youth protection, and intersectionality within the YPS movement. Mina also serves as a co-chair of the US YPS Coalition, where she leads over 75 organizations to advocate to the US government for YPS integration. She received both her BA and MS in conflict analysis and resolution from George Mason University. Mina is here to enrich us on the current status of YPS at the global level, presenting some key steps taken and supported by SEARCH since the adoption of UNSCR 2250, including some recommendations and commitments made at the high-level conference on youth-inclusive peace process, or simply Doha conferences. I'm using this opportunity to also request everyone to put their questions and insights into the comment of any platform they are using to watch us. Mina John, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Safi John. Thank you to Amaral, and thank you to all my lovely panelists. I appreciate and admire all the work that all of you do, and I'm excited to hear everyone else's remarks. So I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of the state of where we are with YPS today. Ludmila gave a really beautiful background of why YPS even came about and how it even came about and who the key actors and players behind it were. I'm going to kind of bring us to today's world. So if we could share my slides super quickly, that would be awesome, or if I can share on my end. I don't know if my slides are sharing and I can't see them. But... Wonderful, thank you. So I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about Search for Common Ground for those who may not be familiar. Search is the world's largest dedicated peacebuilding organization, meaning we have programs and offices in over 30 countries around the world where we work with communities to avoid violent conflict and use more productive and peaceful means of resolving conflict. We co-chaired the Global Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security, which was kind of the founding advocacy group behind Resolution 2250, and really leads the YPS field and community in advocating for YPS at local, regional, and national levels. We played a pretty foundational role in drafting most of the Security Council resolutions and organizing and supporting young people in their advocacy. And a lot of our programming around the world is really focused on engaging with young people, building young people's capacities for peace building, and elevating young people's work in some of the most dire situations around the world. So on to the next slide, please. So to kind of talk a little bit about why young people and why youth are so important to peace building in general, which I think sets a very foundational framework for where we are as a generation in the world right now. On to the next slide, please. A lot of us have seen kind of the demographic breakdown of young people. If you look around the world, especially in countries that are deemed to be, conflict zones, Afghanistan, for example, has a median age of 18, South Sudan, median age of 19. A lot of these countries are super, super, super young. So when we think about building peace and when we think about including young people, it's impossible to not include them. When we first started with the Resolution 2250, statistics showed us that there are about 1.8 billion young people, but USAID recently updated that number to 2.4 billion young people worldwide. And that number is extremely important when we think about the power that we as a generation have and where we really sit in the world. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some challenges and barriers. And then next slide, please. Cool. So 3 main challenges to young people today when it comes to getting involved in peace building. Number 1, exclusion and marginalization. I think we all know this on a very personal level, that young people are just not included in high-level decision-making. Studies show that less than 2% of the world's parliamentarians and politicians are below the age of 30. So we are really just not represented in spaces that we can make a really big impact. Second is an infringement on our safety and our rights. We're often targeted as young people for the work that we do, from legal ways, physical ways, digital ways, and so many others that really impact our ability to be positive actors for peace. And then 3 is a lack of access to resources and support. The YPS field is highly underfunded, and youth peace building work is often not seen as a priority in the eyes of donors. And so it's really hard for young people to continue doing their work when there is such a big lack of resources. And then next slide, please. And, if you look at how YPS was in 2015 when it was founded versus how it is today, the world is drastically different. We're facing some of the highest levels of global violence in almost 3 decades. And, just last week, we saw a major world power for the first time infringe on another major power since World War II. Now, this isn't the first time it's happened since 2015, of course. We've seen many Western countries invade. But this is one of the first times that it's escalated to such a high global level where we're seeing world powers really debate at a global stage. And we're seeing our institutions that we have built to prevent such global conflict from happening really challenged. We're sitting at the convergence of COVID-19, a global pandemic. This was something that a lot of previous generations have never faced before. And then climate change, of course. So these multiple crises have really shaped our generation and shaped the way we're thinking about what it's going to be like moving forward and how we're going to really use the YPS agenda and movement to tackle these issues and build long-lasting peace. Next slide, please. Super quickly about trust. I think the past few years have also shown us how much the young generation doesn't trust the institutions that are meant to serve us. And again, I'm using Ukraine as an example. The United Nations and so many other foundational organizations like NATO, for example, were built to prevent things like this, but we're seeing that challenge. We're seeing our health institutions challenged and so many other things challenged, and our generation really coming up with solid solutions and ideas about how to fix them and reimagine a more peaceful and impactful world. And then next slide, please. And I super quickly wanted to touch upon protection and safeguarding. Last summer, the UN Secretary General Envoy on Youth's Office released the If I Disappear report, which for the first time highlighted at a very high global level the major protection challenges that young people face in civic spaces. The list that you see here shows the different barriers and threats that young people face, from some of the most prevalent being sociocultural, political, and financial, to less prevalent like the impact of the pandemic. But if you have not had a chance to read this report, I highly recommend you to scan the QR code on the screen and give the report a read, because it really sets the stage for the major issues that young people are facing to their peace building work and offers some really great concrete recommendations for us to take on in our advocacy to create more peaceful and safe spaces for us to engage in peace building. And then next slide, please. And you can, and then next slide. So I'm going to quickly talk about some of the kind of foundational frameworks that we have and some key recommendations that we have for moving forward, kind of building on some of the documents that Ludmila talked about. So next slide, please. So really YPS is sitting on this idea that we're shifting the way that policymakers and adults think about young people, from instead of thinking of us as, these problems and this solution that we need to fix, but really thinking about young people as key partners in fixing the problems that we see. And studies also show that that the majority of young people are in fact peaceful, and so there lies a really great opportunity there. And then if you could skip the next 2 slides, please. I'm actually going to move forward because I know we're running close on time. And then 1 more slide, please. Thank you. Awesome. So Ludmila talked a lot about the UN Security Council resolutions and how that really helped shape the foundation of the field. But you can see on this timeline here that we really started talking about shaping political norms, shifting the narrative around young people, and then going into institutions to really act on these norms. And that's kind of where we sit in between right now, is working with institutions, but also strengthening local commitments and strategies for YPS. And this is extremely important because I think all of the big challenges that I talked about earlier, COVID-19, conflict at a local, regional, global level, and so many other problems really comes down to us on a local level taking these UN Security Council resolutions and acting upon them. And it's really important that we as a community start thinking strategically about what this looks like in so many different contexts, right? The way we implement YPS in Nigeria, for example, is very different than in Colombia, which is very different than in Sri Lanka. And so really building out these local frameworks for YPS is a really critical thing for our field at this moment. And then super quickly to the next slide. I wanted to use a quick example in the United States about how, oh, sorry, my slides didn't update. Okay, no worries. I wanted to use a quick example in the United States. One way that we're doing this is we've introduced a policy called the Youth Peace and Security Act, which is one of the first policies that we've seen around the world to really codify YPS and the US government's approach to foreign assistance and global security. Ludmila talked about national action plans in Nigeria and Finland. That's another approach people have been taking. And it really just depends on what really works best for your context and for your country. Ludmila also talked about, 2 documents that came out of the high-level global conference on youth peace and security. Now, these are extremely important, and this conference was extremely important. It was organized by the governments of Qatar, Finland, and Colombia, included high-level commitments from major world leaders, and really motivated young people to make those world leaders act upon those commitments. So when we think about our advocacy, these documents are going to be extremely helpful. The first, on implementing YPS at a country level, provides a coordinated path for YPS through participatory processes with young people and civil society. And it also talks about the importance of providing adequate institutional capacities, financial resources to really make sure that this work is sustained. And the second document presents a strategic actionable plan to help move from youth-inclusive norms towards youth-inclusive practices in designing and implementing peace processes. So what we're really seeing is, like, when I shared that timeline, for example, we saw how we moved from shifting political norms to shaping institutions to really now getting into this phase of implementing this in our communities at a very local level and really moving away from shaping narrative to really acting upon that narrative. And then next slide, please. And I will close out and stop talking because I know I've been talking for a long time. But I think some other recommendations I wanted to add and some other resources to use in our advocacy is really understanding that we as a generation are sitting at a really unique point in history. I think a lot of the current events, as taxing as they may be, are an opportunity for us to rethink the world anew and really reimagine the way that we as young people are acting to prevent and mitigate conflict. It's really important for us to also think about intergenerational trust. I think that's very foundational. And when you read these documents and when you hear the recommendations that are coming from the field, intergenerational trust is a really key layer there. We also need to strengthen our movement of global solidarity. I mean, we're seeing the war in Ukraine, being live streamed on TikTok, and we're seeing so much outrage, especially from Western communities, on this conflict, which is wonderful, and that global solidarity is important. But I want to highlight that global solidarity we haven't been seeing with so many other conflicts that have happened. I mean, the US bombed about 2 different countries in the same week that Ukraine happened, but we don't talk about that. And so really building that movement of global solidarity and highlighting conflict and violence in all of its forms is extremely important. Again, using these key roadmaps and recommendations in our advocacy, the If I Disappear report and the 2 reports from the Doha conference are extremely important. And then diversifying and creating more inclusive spaces. We've talked a lot about young women's inclusion. We've talked a lot about, diversifying the field, but I think that there's a lot more room for us to create a more inclusive space. And then lastly, building on the global solidarity thing is breaking down some of these colonial powers and colonial traumas that have really rooted in our ability to really impact institutions at a global level. And I think we as a community definitely have the capacity to do so, and these different roadmaps and documents offer us that. So I'm going to stop talking now and turn it back over to Safi and Romeral to hand it over to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Mina John. It was really insightful, agreeing on the point and which youths are the solution, not the problem, which was very interesting to me, and I'm sure it was interesting to our audience. I want to let the audience know that we will have Mina John for the Q&A sessions, and you will have the chance to ask any questions, and I will give the floor to Room for the rest of the panel. Thank you, Mina John.
Thank you so much, Saki and Mina, for very, as Saki mentioned, insightful and very strong messages as well. No, a lot of intersectionality question that came into as well. So I hope for everyone who is listening, please do keep putting your question or comments on the chat from wherever you are joining, so that we can address it towards the end of the presentation from our panelists. So thank you again. And now we would like to go to kind of a second segment within this panel and discussion to see how actually this whole youth, peace and security agenda translate at the regional, national and local level. So we already heard from Ludmila and Mina how important it is that an agenda that came actually from the grassroots level, from a lot of advocacy from young people that went up to the Security Council with the adoption of, at this point, 3 resolutions on youth, peace and security. But how does that translate? How does that actually been supporting the work of young peace builder on the ground? I think that has been a critical question that I keep hearing and also being asked from young peace builder around the world. How do we actually use it? How do we make a difference with it? How it can be a tool to open doors, maybe to build partnership and collaboration with other actors. So in that sense, we have for that segment and for those questions, 3 guest speakers who will be discussing this and presenting how this agenda, the youth, peace and security agenda, has made a difference or can be used at different level. And we'll start with Rosario Garavito, who is an SDG activist, member of the Youth Advisory Board of the UN Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights, and founder and executive director of the Millennial Movement, which is a youth-led organization that engages youth in 16 countries in the Latin American and Caribbean region. So she serves currently as elected focal points for the children, adolescent, and youth group of the Latin America and the Caribbean Civil Society Participation Mechanism, MGCY, and for the formal review of the 2030 Agenda at the United Nations. So it's really a pleasure to have you, Rosie, with us. And I will give you in a moment the floor for you to explain a little bit how does it look, this youth, peace and security agenda related to SDG 16 as well in the region of Latin America and the Caribbean, how through your movement, through the different hats that you are wearing today, how you have been using to use or not this agenda. So thank you so much for being with us, and the floor is yours, Rosie.
Thank you, Romeral, and thank you, everyone. I feel very honored and happy to share with you in this session. And whenever we talk about the youth, peace, and security agenda in our region, in the Latin American region, it's a bit different because our context is different. The Latin American and Caribbean region is the most violent region in the world, but we don't have the conflicts that are perceived as well as, or are seen or have more attention as, the different wars or different situations in other continents. So why are we then, if we don't have any declared war or situation like that in our region, the most violent in the world? It's because of criminality and different things that happen in our region. So today I really want to share how the dynamic can really present a different view of what the youth in the Latin American and Caribbean region believe. So the first thing I will say is the understanding on the dynamics. Our region it's different. Definitely we have some consultations with young people, and they have identified, for instance, last year SDG 16 was being reviewed was an SDG under review for the revision of the 2030 agenda. And we ran a consultation, and one of the things that stayed on my mind was when a girl mentioned that whenever she goes to school in El Salvador, she doesn't know if she's going to be able to go back home, or if her students, because she was also teaching, were going to be able to go back home. So because criminality and different situations can happen only in the way from your house to your school. And somehow, even though it's a hard situation for many youth, adolescents, and children in the region, we have been living in this dynamic for so long that at some point it's somehow harder to realize that this is not a context that where youth and children and adolescents should be living into. You know, we even make jokes about this situation because we are living every day under this. But on top of that, we are adding different dynamics. For instance, our region is as well the most dangerous for environmental defenders. So some countries kind of collect the majority of crimes and murderers to environmental defenders. And it's not just that we are losing the environmental defender that is already doing, it's not committing crimes, it's just defending their environments and how, and the ecosystem they are actually living into. We also see there that develops different kind of situations, such as displacement of the communities who are in there. Youth are threatened; they live with fear, but also we see abandonment of children, adolescents, and youth because they lose their parents, they lose their communities. Young people that after they lose their parents and they are in a situation of or in English it would be orphans, you know. So this situation increases inequalities, and then we keep increasing all the different structural gaps that we have in our region. Another kind of violence that we have seen, and it's very it's very structural in our region, is gender violence, and then all the different kind of violence that we've seen in the pandemic. One of the big things that we have identified, even though that we were going through curfews and we were staying at home because regulations wouldn't allow us to leave, is that we have experimented the disappearance of young girls and women. Adolescents and girls have been disappearing, and we don't have strong answers for that. On top of that, the violence against women in our houses have increased. So even though, as you can see, we don't have an armed conflict necessarily in the whole spread on the whole region, you have different situations and detonants. You have narco traffic. You, for instance, have still some remnants of terrorist groups and in some countries the FARC, guerrillas, and also criminal groups that are taking over communities, and they are taking over not only some specific spaces. They are expanding, and they are threatening people and asking them for money if they want to keep living, if they want to keep going to school, if they want to keep working, they need to pay a fee. So the situation is quite hard, but definitely the response of young people is being good as well in some way, because we have seen a big mass of young people demanding in different countries for the implementation now before the ratification of the Exclusion agreement, an agreement that is going to allow us to move forward from a situation that we are, at least with environmental defenders, because it gives us access to information, also make us more participative whenever a decision is taking place for our environment. And it's the only environmental agreement in the world that focuses on human rights of environmental defenders. So for us, that specific agreement even can cover up a little bit what the Paris Agreement is missing right now, because they took up the human rights little phrase from the text that was approved last year. So definitely for us, that's important. So from the Millennials Movement and with the support of ECLAC and other youth-led groups, we are mobilizing, we are trying to connect the dots and so on. And even the guys from Genoa in Latin America last year ran some consultations, and something that they identify as well on this is the levels of corruption and how corruption in our region is leading to more violence against youth. And the sadly thing is that the violence can explode even more when we are on the streets demanding our fair education, demanding that we have access to health, demanding that we have access to sexual rights. So whenever we see that, for instance, the policies are changing and our educational systems are being destroyed just because there is corruption and because there are some other interests moving forward. So whenever in this report, and it's a very nice report, I will very glad to share on the chat with you all, you can see that our region has different dynamics. And finally, just to close, because I also know that I'm on time on this, we have a huge problem right now with migration. We have migration from Central America going to the north, but also we have migration from, for instance, Venezuela that is spreading across the region. But also we have internal migration from provinces or isolated. Not isolated. Yes, I can say that towns within the countries to the capitals. So this is a very hard dynamic because there is a lot of discrimination going on. And at least in the case the migration between countries, for instance, Venezuela to other countries, but also from Central America to North America, we are not really seeing, or we are not really putting the right words and the right response on top of this, because we are treating all these people as migrants, not as refugees, taken a lot of support from their situations whenever they enter to the other countries. And for us, that's very difficult because they are really struggling in different ways. We have kids being in cages, so I don't want to stand on that. But definitely, how we are also considering these people that is being displaced due to conflict, due to a threat into their lives. Whenever we see this, we are not considering them with the right names, and we are not calling it for the name it is. Many of these people are refugees. So this is kind of the dynamic that we can see in our region, and I hope that I'm not taking more time from the other participants, but definitely I'm open to words and stand on some other points on the question and answer segment. So thank you very much for this opportunity to share a little bit about what's happening here. Mm-hmm.
Muchas gracias, Rosario. Thank you so much. And yes, indeed, we'll have some question popping up, and I know some participants might even join online to ask the question. But I really would like also to emphasize on a couple of things you mentioned that I feel it's very important when we think, reflect, and want to work on this youth, peace, and security agenda. First is, what does it mean? So I think very rightfully you presented how different it is perhaps for a region as Latin America and the Caribbean, how perhaps in certain region it has also been kind of a justification. No, we actually don't really need to work on this agenda because perhaps we do not have an open armed conflict right now. And at the same time, how it has been a very big push of young peace builders across the world saying that this agenda is relevant for any country, for any context around the world. And as you were saying, especially in a context as Latin America and the Caribbean, when we see very high levels of crime, of violence, of homicides, etc., and sexual violence, as you were also mentioning. So what does it mean? No, so very different responses probably coming from the region, but also very urgent need to work on the advancement and implementation of the YPS in Latin America and the Caribbean as well. And then again, as some other as well mentioned, no, the intersectionality you were mentioning as well when it comes to peace building. At the end of the day, I think we understand peace building as this holistic umbrella that has very different elements as well that are contributing to the agenda. No, you were mentioning environment, human rights, but also the question of migration, of refugees, gender violence, etc. So how can we also understand all these agenda also being very much interlinked, and that there is no chance we'll be working on peace building if we do not address those issues as well. So thank you so much, Rosario, for your presentation and very important points that you made today. And I would like to give the floor back to Saki. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rom and Rosario, for the very important points, especially on the diversity of the context that also Mina mentioned about the diverse interactions and solutions that we have to think of having in mind the diverse contexts. Thank you, Rosario. I will use this opportunity to introduce our next panelist, Alwell, who will join the screen in few seconds. Thank you, Alwell, for accepting to be part of the panel. Alwell is a youth peace and security specialist who champions the mainstreaming of youth in peace building in Nigeria and across the globe. As the research director at Building Blocks for Peace Foundation, a youth-led peace-building organization, he leads the production of evidence-based knowledge outputs on Nigerian youth peacebuilding, including the connecting and amplifying the voice of youth peacebuilding in Nigeria, book published in December 2020, policy briefs, and also projects. Alwell has shared his peacebuilding experiences on YPS on top platforms, including the United Nations Peacebuilding Commission and the US Congress, and he has a master's degree in peace and conflict studies. Having in mind the knowledge of YPS on the region, we will now go deeper and we'll have Alwell to discuss the efforts made on implementing YPS agenda at the national level in Nigeria, especially focusing on the recent YPS National Action Plan. Alwell, the floor is yours. We will be here for any support. I think your mic is mute.
Sorry to everyone. I think there was some issues with the headphones, so I trust Alwell will join in a moment. If not, we'll go to our next guest speaker, but let's provide maybe a moment to Alwell to rejoin. And we'll like to give you a reminder to please keeping your questions, comments on the chat so that we can also share with our panelists later on. Alwell, welcome back. It might have been a problem with the headphones. I don't know if that would work. We can still not hear you at the moment. So maybe if you remove or disconnect your headphones, that might work better. Still not working. If you need a little bit of time, we can give you that time. And while, if that's okay with everyone, we can go to Vera, who is our next speaker today. So if that's okay with Vera, we put you on the spot and to support Alwell. And we can hear you though, so that's very great news. So thank you so much, Vera, for being with us. Alwell, if you hear us, take your time. We'll go with Vera and we'll then end up with Alwell. But before giving you the floor, Vera, I would like to briefly introduce you and of course, thanking you for being with us today. So Vera Hussein Al-Maula, who is originally from Lebanon and is the president and co-founder of Piece of Art NGO. She is a musician, a trainer with experience working with children and youth from diverse backgrounds, coming from a multicultural and multi-religious family herself. I also know Vera personally through her work in peace building and very much delighted to have you with us. So the idea is that you will be able to share a little bit what have you been doing through your organization and also through this very, I would say, more creative, innovative approach using arts and music into peace building. So that was, if I remember correctly, also one of the recommendations Mina was telling us, no, how can we be a little bit more creative? And I know participants who are joining today also had a workshop on, creativity approaches to peace building. So hopefully you will be able to share a little bit more with us. What does it mean, this youth peace and security agenda at the local level, perhaps with a community or young people who are peace builders, but who haven't needed actually to have this agenda on board because they are doing the work anyways. So Vera, the floor is yours, and thank you again for being with us.
Thank you so much, dear Ramiral. Thank you, everyone, dear colleagues, panelists, partners, young activists, peace builders, and peace building networks. It is first an honor for me to be speaking here with you today. Allow me first to introduce myself. My name is Vera Al-Maula, president and co-founder of Piece of Art. Our organization, Piece of Art, started with the vision of one person, Mahdi Yahya, the founder and chairman of Piece of Art, who left his marginalized area to seek education and returned with a plan and an idea to serve and change the local community affected by tensions and conflict. Piece of Art started in 2016 as a humanitarian organization and as the first fine arts academy that offers the people of the Northern Bekaa Valley in Lebanon an artistic and safe outlet in an area affected by conflict and violence, and which is isolated from the rest of the areas of Lebanon, as it is considered a red zone by embassies and international entities. Piece of Art's work focuses basically on bridging communities and engaging youth on the local level through arts, sport, culture, and technology in parallel with civic training, awareness sessions, and discussion circles focusing on peace building, inclusion, and active leadership. Our programs are focusing on building the capacities of youth and their skills that would help them become active and positive change makers in their own communities. And this includes leadership skills, communication skills, conflict resolution, peace building, accepting diversity, nonviolent communication, citizenship, gender equality, positive masculinities, peaceful coexistence between religions, nationalities, sectors, and diverse backgrounds, and all of this through art and civic training, and in addition to other skills. Our organization is the Lebanese member of the United Network of Young Peace Builders, UNY, a proud member, and a global network, which is a global network of 125 youth organizations around the world working on peace building and the implementation of the YPS agenda. Piece of Arts programs are focusing on youth, women, and marginalized groups. One of our programs, for example, is Young Media Creators, a project implemented in partnership with PAX for Peace, and which trains 16 youth on photography, filmmaking, social media, and content creation, as well as storytelling and presentation, communication skills, leadership, gender equality, advocacy, and debate. And youth are continuing to work on media content focusing on local challenges and their own concerns as youth in their own communities. Another project is Art Against Violence, which is funded by the US Embassy and which targeted over 18 months, 300 youth. Youth groups received training on leadership, conflict resolution, citizenship, and coexistence, integrated with 6 different arts. The arts are filmmaking, script writing, photography and art editing, piano and music theory, guitar and songwriting, drawing and fine art, as well as theater and expressive storytelling. And youth from different backgrounds were working collectively on mutual art projects that were focusing on their own messages, and these messages were exhibited to local figures and stakeholders and active members of the society. Piece of Arts team was also has also implemented an art and psychosocial support program with UNESCO, which is called We Rise Through Art. This program was for children affected by Beirut's explosion, and this program included arts, music, drawing, sports, and gymnastics activities with psychosocial support to help children and pre-adolescents deal with the stress and the trauma after the horrific accident. We Play for Peace is another project we implemented in partnership with Advocacy under the Youth 360 program, which allowed building bridges among youth from diverse backgrounds through sports, volleyball, yoga, and other sports that were integrating from different backgrounds. We launched the first co-working space in the Northern Bekaa area and the Innovative Academy as an open space for discussions and for youth of the diverse backgrounds to meet, interact, and work on mutual projects. This space is also a hub for the youth to build their skills in technology, and this is implemented in partnership with PAX as well. Our organization was invited to the EU Parliament in Brussels, where my colleague Mahdi Yahya represented Piece of Art on the International Day of Democracy. And we were invited as well to the United Nations headquarters in New York, where we shared our experience and approaches with regional entities and member states. We launched also in 2021 our bi-monthly newsletter highlighting our activities and programs. And I would be happy to share with you our links as well, maybe in the chat later on, so you can join our newsletter family as well. We published our We Rise Through Art Trainers Handbook, which is a downloadable toolkit young trainers can use to implement art-based peace-building activities, and I will share the links as well for this handbook. Finally, I would just like to say that as you all can see today, the world is changing very quickly, and unfortunately, tensions and conflicts and violence are on the increase. The last was with the Ukrainian-Russian conflict that we all are following up very closely. With Piece of Art, we want to share our message of peace and coexistence, especially in places of conflict. We believe that art and dialogue are the tools and the way to fight violence, wars, extremist mentalities that are rising, and racism and discrimination. Thank you so much. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Vera, for giving us very concrete example on how it actually works on the ground to push this agenda, and also how you have been using arts, but culture in general, music, sports as well. So thank you so much. I'm not sure we have Allwell back, but in case I want to check, because I do think Allwell is there. That's nice. Hi, and welcome back, Allwell. I hope you can hear us. We'll give you the floor in a moment, but I just want to say again, thank you to Vera, and reminding everyone to keep your comments. After Allwell, we will open the floor for some question and answer, and also very final round of question for our panelists. So if Allwell, you are here,
Hi,
we would
Romera.
invite you to come. I think your introduction was already very nicely done through Saki, so I'm not going to repeat, but I do want to highlight the crucial role that your organization has been playing in having one of the first national action plans that has been endorsed on youth peace and security. So one was in Finland and then Nigeria, so congratulations on that. And of course on the big efforts that Building Blocks for Peace has in this process. So I trust you will also give us some insight and inspiration for some other young peace builders around the world who do want to push their own government to actually endorse such similar roadmap or action plans. So I hope it's working now. Can you try?
Yeah, can you hear me? Excellent. Sorry about that. Yeah.
No
okay.
worries. So the floor is yours, and I think Yuda will also help us with your presentation. So thank you all for being with us.
Thank you so much, guys. Sincere apologies for my tech issues. So just really delighted to join this conversation today and to share experiences basically from Nigeria in pushing youth peace and security, particularly the successful launch of our National Action Plan on Youth Peace and Security in November 2021. So Yuda, I don't know if you could help share the slides so I could just quickly go through it. But just to say that connecting with Ludmila's presentation about the success of young people in pushing for the introduction of the Youth Peace and Security Agenda in New York since 2015, and then the subsequent resolution 2419 in 2018, and then the last one in 2020. What myself and my colleagues were wondering was, how do we move these good intentions from New York? How do you bring them to the ground in Nigeria, particularly in Abuja, in Lagos, in Maiduguri, in different parts of the country that really need young people to step up and contribute to peace and security? Please help me with the slides. Well, I guess I'll just get started. But the background for the background for youth peace and security in Nigeria is best if you understand the context within which I'm speaking to. Next slide, please. You see that Nigeria is Africa's most populous country, with up to 62% of Nigeria's 200 million population under the ages of 25. Unfortunately, stakeholders in Nigeria have constantly considered that large mass of young people. They have always considered it as a form of youth bulge, so a threat to peace and security in the country. And then again, when you combine that mass of young people with other socioeconomic indices such as grinding poverty, unemployment, violent conflicts, it kind of like creates this perception by the government, security agencies, and the public generally that young people are perpetrators of violence. Now, in reality, the opposite is the case. Young people are the ones pioneering innovations in Nigeria, particularly leading in fintech. Some of you that are active in the fintech ecosystem, you will know that a lot of Nigerian startups were bought for over $200 million over the last 2 years. And then there's been a big boom in African tech that's really driven by Nigerian fintech companies. So e-commerce, music, most of you must have heard of Afropop from around the world, films, technology. Nigerian youth are the vanguard of moving Nigeria to the next level. Next slide, please. So, but the next slide, please. When you zero in on Nigerian peace builders, what exactly do they do? How exactly do they come into play in Nigeria's peace and security architecture? So what peace builders like myself and my fellow colleagues, what we're doing is implementing countering violent extremism capacity building interventions across the length and breadth of the country. We're also making peace education campaigns that target vulnerable young people in marginalized areas. Besides that, we're also bringing out innovative ways of using social and traditional media peace sensitization campaigns, and then moving forward to include other key stakeholders in creating multi-stakeholder inclusive dialogues that lead to peace in Nigeria. And then finally, we are doing our very best to document the impact of youth-led organizations in producing evidence-based research that shows that we are key stakeholders in Nigeria's peace architecture. Next slide, please. But the key part of my presentation today is just really reflecting on Nigeria's National Action Plan, the process that led up to it, the methodology, how we engage with other key actors across the spectrum, and then what the next steps are for Nigeria in terms of achieving its youth peace and security agenda. Now, we're the second country in the world to launch a National Action Plan, and we are very fiercely proud about that prospect. But we don't intend to rest on our laurels or on our oars, and we're looking forward to the future. Next slide, please. So here you have a colleague of mine who is showing off the most recently launched National Action Plan on Youth Peace and Security, which was launched on November 1, 2021. This is a result of over 5 years of work, and we're immensely proud about it. Next slide. So let me give you a background to this National Action Plan. So basically it has been an attempt to localize the youth peace and security agenda in Nigeria, particularly the first youth peace and security resolution, that's UNSCR 2250. So this NAP, it actually identifies the roles of key stakeholders in promoting YPS, particularly government ministries, departments and agencies, civil society organizations, private sector, amongst others. What is important to note is that this NAP is a 3-year pilot program. So it's starting from 2021 up until 2024. And then there would be a mid-year review sometime around the beginning of 2023. And of course, like I said, we're only the second country in the world to have a NAP that kind of like centers on empowering youth peace builders. Next slide, please. So in this next slide, I kind of like walk you through the process, how we were able to engage with other key stakeholders to achieve this feat. So this started in 2016 between the Premier Ministry, the Nigerian government agency, or the Ministry of Youth and Sports Development that is in charge of youth empowerment. So a collaboration between that and then some key agencies within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here, Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution, and then one particularly youth-led organization that was like the pen holder for drafting the entire National Action Plan, of course, and then a lot of support and consultations from youth-led organizations like mine and that of my colleagues as well. So the process really, so starting from 2016, began this conversation around how to domesticate the UNSCR 2250. In the process, we had 9 in-person consultations. Now, this took various forms across the country in terms of national conferences, zonal workshops, community-level FGDs, and then they were really multi-stakeholder and inclusive in the sense that they brought youth peace builders together, CSOs, government, security agencies, media, traditional religious leaders. Beyond the in-person consultations, we also had 12 online consultations. Now, this included bringing youth peace builders together. We had like a coalition, which we call the Nigerian Coalition of Youth Peace and Security, that my organization, Building Blocks for Peace Foundation, helped create in 2019 with over like 50 youth-led organizations. So over the last at least 3 years, we have consistently been having these online consultations, providing input into the context and then the content of that national action plan to make sure that it's as representative as possible. So beyond that, there were also written inputs by youth peace builders and CSOs like myself. I had the opportunity to review the entire draft when it was drafted, and then I also made my inputs and then send it back to the pen holder, amongst other things. Finally, we had a national validation workshop on August 27, 2021, where before we had like major regional-based workshops across the 6 geopolitical zones in Nigeria, but then all of us converged in Abuja, the capital, and then we had this national validation workshop in August 2021. Finally, we launched the National Action Plan on YPS in November 1st, 2021. Next slide, please. So really, what's the National Action Plan about? It's kind of like just really centered on galvanizing local action around each of the 5 pillars of the UNSCR 2250. So as you may recall, there are 5 pillars in that resolution that kind of aim to empower young people to be included in the peace and architecture of any country. So these 5 steps include participation, protection, prevention, partnership, and disintegration and reintegration. So what the National Action Plan actually does is that it follows through on each of these 5 pillars and then breaks them down into like strategic objectives, strategic outcomes, and then identifies like the key activities that we intend to implement to get us to drive the attainment of this national action of these pillars that combine to make the National Action Plan. Now, since the process started in 2016, it really doesn't. The model is kind of like UNSCR 2250. So other more recent resolutions like 2419 and 2250, they don't 2250 25. Sorry, those ones they don't. Well, they kind of factor in. They are slightly covered in each of these pillars, but then the major context for domesticating the YPS for us is the 2250. So amongst other things, it speaks to like localize YPS in each of Nigeria's 36 states. So beyond that, then it now identifies the lead partners on YPS that should be driving YPS frontiers in Nigeria. So that would include government, CSOs, regional bodies like the Economic Community of West African States, African Union, international organizations, the UNDP and UN agencies, then multinational corporations, private sector, particularly like high net worth individuals in Nigeria, and then financial institutions. So among some of the very, very interesting activities include like appointment of YPS NAP, National Action Plan focal points across the country, and then using like a test phase of implementing the NAP in like 6 pilot states, first of all. The next slide, please. So this is all interesting in terms of us coming together to do something really historic. But then when I was reviewing the National Action Plan in particular, I kind of noticed some loopholes that still persist even now that it has been launched. And one of the loopholes that I saw was really, and the idea of sharing all of this is to empower youth peace builders across the world, because all things being equal, hopefully more countries will get to implement their national action plans. And kind of like things that you should be looking out for to make sure that that national action plan is airtight and as much as possible, it speaks to the context on the ground. So the first thing I noticed that there wasn't like any clear consensus on how to provide youth-sensitive funding to empower youth-led peace builders to make impact. If you recall one of the earlier slides, I had already talked about the impact and the activities that youth-led organizations were doing or had been carrying out in Nigeria prior to the launch of the National Action Plan. So even before the plan came about, my organization, for instance, was formed in 2016, and since that time, from that time till now, we have been leading the frontiers, provoking collaborations among youth organizations themselves. I'm leading advocacy, being at the forefront of providing evidence-based research about what we're doing about the impact of other youth organizations. So what I was really hoping to get from the National Action Plan was kind of like a very detailed analysis of an acknowledgement of the strides that have been made so far by Nigerian youth-led peace builders, but most importantly, how to provide youth-sensitive funding. So what we have done is make impacts to the best of our abilities. Now, in 2020, I co-edited a book for my organization that identified the impact of 16 youth-led organizations in Nigeria, ranging from sustainable livelihoods to climate justice to peace education to countering violent extremism to gender-based, sexual and gender-based violence programming. And what I did find out from that research that I did was most Nigerian youth-led organizations are working with budgets of less than $2,000 annually. Now, global research says it's about $5,000 annually, but Nigerian organizations in particular, they're working with less than $2,000 annually. At some point in my career, I worked with Search for Common Ground, the biggest peace building organization in the world. So I know that amount, even $5,000, is less than, it's not enough to carry out a particular activity of a big project by an INGO, for instance. So imagine a youth organization running on $2,000 throughout the year, and they're doing its best to make impact in local communities. So what I expected to see, and what I would suggest for subsequent national action plans that come up in other countries, would be to see clear-cut action, a clear-cut plan to see how you can sustain the impact of youth organizations, particularly through youth-sensitive funding. Secondly, philanthropy in Nigeria has really improved over the last couple of years. There has been a lot of the growth of like a whole lot of high net worth individuals, big time philanthropists, tech gurus, business tycoons. So what I was really hoping to get as well from the National Action Plan was to see how the drafters and how all of us were going to like identify specific entry points on how to tap the private sector, particularly like high net worth individuals that are involved in philanthropy on peace building. So just to really see how we can divert the attention to driving YPS in Nigeria, so that YPS isn't just a government-centric or policymaker-centric position. Yeah, it's something that comes from, like, it involves like a whole of system approach, particularly using the private sector. There are a couple of mentions of the private sector here and there, but then there's no like detailed explanation or description of the way forward of how to tap that. And secondly, another thing that I found was a danger there in the National Action Plan was the possibility of like duplicating resources and capacities. So for instance, the National Action Plan, amongst other things, wants to create like one youth organization in each of the 774 local government areas of Nigeria. So, but I felt like in the coalition where I'm part of, my organization is part of, the Nigerian Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security alone, we have over 50 youth-led peace building organizations there that are working across the country, across whose work cuts across each of these 774 local governments. So I felt like it could be duplication of resources for us to want to create new organizations with probably less capacity than the $2,000 that most of us are working with, who might not be able to make more impact. Instead, to avoid duplication of resources, what would have been best would be how to channel the existing resources to the existing youth organizations that were making impact. Then finally, again, and I think this just keeps on coming up, even in global YPS agenda, the fact that even when it's still time to engage young people or youth peace builders, most policies or national action plans still see youth from the lens of a danger to avoid. So they're still looking at young people from like the lens of countering violent extremism, instead of looking at as young people as like resources and potentials to harness. So unfortunately, this still kind of, the national action plan still looks like, still appears like the whole youth are a danger. If you don't want to get young people to erupt into violence, then these are the kind of things you should do, instead of looking at young people like a true resource for national development and peace, which they actually are in Nigeria. My final slide, please. So here I just kind of like reflect on next steps here for Nigeria in implementing the YPS. So what's the next in our horizon? How do we build on this great achievement? Like I said, this is an incredible achievement. We were really honored to be like the second country in the world to be pushing this, to be driving the YPS at this rate. We didn't think it was going to come out this fast, and we're glad for that. But then how do we consolidate on this going forward? Well, the first will be more action and less talk. Yeah. So currently, there's a penchant for governments, and I feel like this is not just in Nigeria, but like around the world. It's the penchant for governments wanting to come up with new ideas, with new policies, and then there's like this whole policy fatigue, because like policies are coming out on a very regular basis, and there's very little action on the ground. In Nigeria, for instance, we already have 2 national action plans on women, peace, and security that were created in the last 10 years. But then there's very little progress that has been made in entrenching women, peace, and security in Nigeria, or in supporting WPS organizations, or looking at the intersection between WPS and YPS organizations and helping young women that are working within that intersection. So what we need is a lot more translated action on the ground rather than more policies. Then again, it's important to put young people squarely in the driving seats of implementing the NAP. So, of course, most likely, just like the case was in Nigeria, it will be driven by governments, and also like maybe larger CSOs or bigger INGOs in this space. But then for it to truly be successful, for it to truly be a national action plan that kind of like, that hits the nail on the head in terms of making young people front and square in the driving seats of peace and security, then you need to make young people be at the forefront of implementing the national action plan in particular. Then again, like I said earlier, it's very important to empower young people with youth-sensitive funding. Then again, that strong partnership remains to be gotten, particularly in Nigeria. That strong partnership between youth peace builders, government security officials, a number of people here on this call that probably followed the events in Nigeria in 2020 must have heard about the NSAS protest. And this was just like some bottled up agitations by Nigerian youths that came from like decades of misrepresentation when I say misrule now, but basically misrepresentation by security forces. So most security agencies see young people as a force to be subdued, as potential criminals, as people who are perpetrating violence. So whenever they say young person, and this perception still persists till date, it's very hard to prove the worth of a young person in front of a security official. So they just generally feel like young people are out to break the laws and constitute a nuisance to the society. So we, in particular, in terms of like partnerships between youth organizations and security forces, there has to be a change in that perception, and then a new orientation of young people as partners, as key critical partners in this work. And finally, we need to protect young people from all forms of harm. Over the last 2 years, kidnapping of young people, of youth peace builders, of school-age children has reached an all-time high in Nigeria. Over 1,000 schools have been closed down across the northern part of the country. Tens of thousands of young children have been kidnapped. A lot more of those children are out of school and then are not able to return to school because of fears of kidnapping, amongst other forms of violence crimes. So most importantly, it's important to protect young people from all forms of harm going forward. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the conversation.
First of all, thanking you for your patience with the audio, but also for being so honest, and really sharing with us also not only the strong points from these national action plans in Nigeria, but also the challenges or perhaps weaknesses that you saw in the national action plan. Because I think, as you mentioned, this is also for inspiration, but also like how we can even do better maybe in other countries. So I think those lessons learned and good practices are definitely essential. And I do want to highlight a few things that you mentioned. I mean, one, looking on the importance of the process. So this national action plan didn't come up out of the blue. It has been really big efforts from the young peace builders on the ground, but also the push of having really meaningful and long-standing partnership with different stakeholders. So you mentioned how the key role on working together and having inclusive processes to have the implementation of the national action plan, but not only during the implementation phase, but also during the design phase. So I think this is something for all of us to learn. How do we have actually inclusive processes where young people are co-leading the process, not only in the implementation phase, but also in the design phase. You also mentioned how can we put and bring some other stakeholder on board that perhaps so far we haven't seen so active or so present in the youth peace and security agenda as the private sector. So that's also something for us to learn as we move forward. And then finally, you also touch upon the youth-sensitive funding, which will definitely come up at the end of this forum, as the declaration will have an important pillar on how do we actually advocate for more youth-sensitive funding as well. So thank you so much, all for your insights and for all the learnings we can get from Nigeria on this very important step. So I would like to invite, as we wrap up this panel, all the panelists on stage, as well as my co-fellow moderator, Saki. And I'm checking if we do have a participant who wanted to ask a question online. And if we do have that participant, then we'll give him, her, or them the floor. It's becoming very small on my screen, so I'm not sure. But yes, do you want to, Yasmina, would you like to have a comment, or can we first wrap up this before we go into the declaration? Or would you like to have a particular comment on the panelist insights? Okay, if not, sorry, Yasmina, please. Do you want to comment something?
No, I don't have any comments. I'm just waiting for to present the declaration, actually. So
No
I'm not.
problem. Thank you, Yasmina. We'll give you the floor in a moment. So I think we had a participant for a moment, but I think there has been also some internet connection for some people. But I just want to highlight what came also from the chat. So some people were really interested from your insights. So we'll make sure to share all the links. There is already someone who is saying on the chat that they want to have this kind of connection and network. So around art. So I think, Vera, you will be contacted soon by some of the fellow participants. But just to wrap up, and we want to give now the chance before we end this forum, because we'll have Yasmina presenting on a declaration that young peace builders who have been in this program drafted together. But before we go into that, and maybe also giving a moment to really close this panel, I would like to give the floor to each one for just in a couple of sentences maximum to tell us, from your point of view, from your experience, which is the priority to continue the acceleration of the youth peace and security agenda. So please keep it short so that it's also impactful message. I know it's a difficult question, but from your position right now, what do you think is the key priority for youth peace and security agenda? And giving the floor first to Ludmila.
Thank you so much, Rom. No, I think that the main priority should be to keep speaking truth to power. We've worked so hard to have the YPS on top of the agenda. It is. We need now to make sure that it keeps being a peace agenda and not an agenda on how to make youth inclusive war, and to make sure that the experiences and the voices of young people are at the center of every debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ludmila. Yeah, I like this truth to power, something to keep in mind. Mina, over to you.
Thank you, Romeral, and thank you everyone else for your amazing remarks. I think each of you brought such an interesting perspective and powerful stories. Well, one, I would say intergenerational collaboration. It's really on us to sit down with our adult partners and hear them and understand them, and then vice versa for them to sit down and hear us and understand us. And then the second piece, I think, is for us to take care of ourselves. The world is really difficult to navigate, and the work we do is really taxing on our mental health. And I love, the Dalai Lama, Mother Teresa. If you listen to their speeches and their quotes, everything says that peace begins within us and begins with a smile. So really take care of ourselves. I think if we're strong as individuals, we'll be strong as a community.
Thank you so much, Mina. Yes, intergenerational dialogue, partnership, and definitely this inner peace, mental health and well-being for young peace builders and activists. Thank you so much. Rosie, over to you.
Thank you, Romero. Well, there are many points, but I would like to refer to some of them. I guess the first should be, or we need to still working from the government side on security, how to protect these young people, these young fellows that are advocating for the youth and peace agenda with in the different dimensions or sectors, whether it's environmental or it's gender, but they are still working on it. So definitely it needs to be a security that has intercultural and gender approaches in order to cover this, but also the message, I guess, to young people on what are the things that needs to keep going on is take the conversation to our peers, to other young people, to our community, because we cannot normalize violence just because we have been living with it our whole lives. We cannot do that. So now that we are learning, now that we are deconstructing, and let's build up together with other young people, let's help them as well to deconstruct these views or paradigms that we have understood in our community, that violence is something that we live with and that's okay, and that's how it always has been. Let's talk about it, let's speak up, and definitely let's demand for more spaces on the decision making at the local level, national level, and finally, I guess it will be a call for different stakeholders, NGOs, other young people, universities, academia, but also other decision makers, Congress people, and so on, to bear with youth, to bear with you in order to keep moving the youth peace and security agenda, and understand that we need in our region to adapt it to our different dynamics, and definitely we need to make this commitment for young people because it's not only our future, it's actually as well our present. So that will be it.
Thank you, Rosie. Many things, but I would definitely highlight accountability, deconstructing violence, adaptation, multi-stakeholder inclusion, and processes. So thank you so much for that. Olwell, over to you.
Thanks, Romero. I feel like there's a lot that youth organizations can do, a lot more impact they can make if they are empowered, fully empowered, without limiting regulations, without very stringent reporting measures, amongst others. So I really do feel like youth-sensitive funding should be something that donors, bilateral, multilateral donors, private foundations, traditional institutions, traditional local institutions should be considering ways in which they can empower young people, so that young people, youth organizations can be sustainable, so that they don't become a flash in the pan. So it's not like an organization is making impact for like the first 4 or 5 years, and then they just suddenly go out of business because there is no funding to keep building on their efforts and then sustaining them. So I feel like if you give young people unrestricted core funding, that they will be able to do wonders with like their innovative programming approaches, that they would be able to bring in their creativity to bear in reaching out to their peers. Young people are the very best. They're the best people to be pushing YPS because they're talking to their peers and then in the languages that they understand. So I feel like we should be more of YPS programming should be going directly to youth-led organizations. Thanks.
Thank you, Olwell. More power to youth, I guess, on one hand, and also how can we promote and ensure that we have more youth-sensitive funding that will definitely contribute to sustainable peace building as well. So last but not least, Vera, over to you for the last remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Romirul. So I'm going to speak concerning the local levels. I think we should be doing further efforts to creating safe spaces and open spaces for youth on local levels as youth organizations, and engaging youth on the local levels, especially in conflict areas. And this is, as Alwell just said, through the language that youth usually understand. That's really close to them. So this is something that I would like to share. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vera. We heard in the other panel, think globally, act locally. So definitely, how can we be more connected to the local level as well? So with this, we will wrap up and end this panel, and thanking you, each one of you again for your presence, for your insight, for your time, dedication, but most important, for all the efforts you are doing at the different levels to push forward this youth peace and security agenda. Thank you so much to Saki also for the co-facilitation, the whole support in organizing, and of course our organizers and coordinators. For everyone who has been following up, we'll definitely share all the materials and the links that our guest speakers have been sharing throughout their presentation. So thank you so much again. And Saki, if you want to say a word, and then we'll give it back to Richard and Yasmina.
Thank you, Rom. Just to make it so short, thank you everyone for joining. Our dear panelists, we will give the floor to Richard and our colleagues. Thank you and bye.
Thank you so much, Romera and Saki, and thank you to all our panelists for really helping us unpack this YPS agenda. This has really been a very interesting conversation and bringing out the different insight from your respective context and the work that you are doing. but also being sincere in your approach, not just speaking about the good things, but identifying some of the loopholes in the policies and the actions that are taking place in your country. And I really found that really interesting as a way going forward if we need to really build a more sustainable solutions where young people are taking active role. I note very particularly the strong push for co-creation, co-management, and that intergenerational collaborations in implementing YPS agenda. And I think it's very important too that in this co-leadership approach that young people also take very have all the resources, the capacity, the empowerment that they need to be able to equally engage in that. And I think from the last panel, we had the 3 E's approach, which talks about education, empowerment, and enabling environment. And this is very important that we help to create those enabling environment that young people are able to add. And taking into account some of these concerns and some of these approaches, we have been working with young peace builders from around the world, about 37 of them who have been selected to be part of the Erasmus Peace Builders Network. Since the beginning of February, we've been meeting every weekend through different sections, training sections, and have worked with a few selected ones who have volunteered their help to bring together the ideas to develop this peace declaration. As a peace network, we also thought that we would need to be able to identify key areas or key policy focus where we will need to see changes in order to build sustainable peace framework and actions around the world, and how the contribution and action of young people can actually be valorized in the different work that they are doing. And so this peace declaration is more to identify already the policies that are there and the actions that are going on, recognize them, but also call for stronger action in certain aspects and certain areas, and how this support should be reinforced in a way that makes young people's agencies and contributions were recognized and were valorized. I mean, I use this opportunity to thank those already who have contributed to that process and who have helped to draft this initial zero draft that my colleague Yasmina will soon be presenting to you in a couple of seconds, and that we would further take input from you at the end of this process. This is just the initial draft, which captures some of the ideas that you brought on board, and also some of the points that were mentioned today at the first and second panels that have just been concluded, and how each of these have been put into a document that we would share with you, most especially the Peace Network members, for further input on them to make it your own document. This is drafted by your colleagues, and we expect that we will take more contribution from your part to make an all-inclusive document that speaks to authority, but also speaks to us as young peace builders. So we'll be looking forward to having your comments and contribution to that document. We would announce the process as the time goes on, how this would be done, and we hope that some of you would be able to collaborate in this case. But in the meantime, I would have Yasmina to present the document as it is right now, and then we would let you know how to advance with the commenting and the editing part as we go on. So Yasmina, if you're ready.
Thank you so much, Richard. I'm just figuring out if anyone can share the declaration. I think
Yes.
that the link was sent, so it would be great to share that. And in the meantime, hello everyone. My name is Yasmina, and I'm part of the Erasmus Plus Peace Builder Network, responsible for youth engagement. I'm very happy to be here with all of you today. And let me tell you that in these chaotic times, it is absolutely inspiring to see so many young peace builders from all across the world come together, sharing a common vision as well as common values for our present as well as our future. And it gives a lot of hope and as well as motivation to keep on going. So we have been working on this peace building declaration. I'm just seeing if Yuda can share, please, the screen so that everybody can see it. But the goal right now is just to share with everyone. I will read the preamble, then quickly go over the three main parts that have been identified. We will then send the draft of the declaration to all those who have signed up for the conference, as well as those that are part of the network, so that you can put changes and amendments and as much as you want. It will be open until March 7th, so for a week. We will then proceed to signing the documents. You could also sign as an individual or as representing your own organization, so feel free to also put your logo there before we, and then after we will reach out to other organizations so they could co-sign with us this declaration. I would like to thank all of those who have contributed and put time and efforts in that regard. Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. So just like any declaration, it starts with the preamble. We, young people from around the globe, reaffirm our commitment to living in a peaceful and safe world. We more people on the planet, more young people on the planet than ever before. It is a demographic and democratic necessity that we are included in efforts to promote peace and security. In this declaration, we provide a unified vision and plan for a reinforced policy framework to assist us in changing conflict, preventing and confronting violence, as well as establish long-lasting peace. This declaration was written by young peace advocates and is a result of intensive consultations to guarantee an inclusive and comprehensive approach to youth, peace, and security. In this regard, we build on the principles of the Charter of the UN, including UN Security Council Resolution 2250, 2419, and 2535 on youth, peace, and security, and acknowledge that the main responsibility of the Security Council under the Charter is to maintain international peace and security. We refer to the importance of recognizing and supporting the role of youth in the fulfillment of the Goals 16 of the United Nations post-2015 Sustainable Development Agenda. We call the importance of the guiding principles of young people's participation in peace building, in creating a foundation that ensures young people's participation and contribution to building peace, including in conflict and post-conflict contexts. Recognize that we youth people are engaged in shaping lasting peace in our communities as positive contributors to peace, justice, and reconciliation. Acknowledge the ongoing work of governments at national and international levels, as well as non-governmental organizations to engage youth in building peace. Recognize the vulnerable status of many young people, including refugees and internally displaced persons. The first section that has been identified is the shift of perspective. In that way, to recognize that young people should be perceived and valued as peace builders, as humanitarian actors in their communities and above, meaning that they should no longer be perceived as victims or as passive observers, but rather as active participants. So I highly encourage you to go over the key points and to bring changes. And if there's another stakeholder that you can think of, feel free to add it as well. Then the key points, you would see that all of the participants have tried to be as inclusive and intersectional as possible, which is absolutely primordial. Then for the second section, we have the governance reform. So this is to ensure that young people are included in all leadership and decision making, and in that sense, governments should be inclusive and meaningfully inclusive of young people and provide them with safe environments so that they can participate in peace building, post-conflict reconciliation, as well as reconstruction processes, so that the main stakeholders will be local, state, and federal governments, as well as parliaments. And you can also see again that there are different key points that have been created. This part, I think, it is very full, but feel free to bring amendments, and it also takes into consideration different intersectionality factors. And then the last key part that we have is financing. So investing in sustainable, intersectional, and equitable funding for youth-led organizations that are working on the youth, peace, and security agendas. I think that this is the section that needs the more improvement and work to be done. So again, I encourage you to bring changes as well as new ideas. Reminder, this is a declaration by the young people. So don't be shy to add adjustments or to add recommendations. It will be open for comments. And yeah, so the stakeholders would be private sector, for-profit companies, philanthropic foundation, local, state, and federal agencies. Then the declaration follows with a call for action with specific key policy recommendations and actions to take by the different stakeholders. And then it will be the end, concluding with reiterating that we are willing to work with all of the different stakeholders in order to implement all of those key points highlighted in the declaration, and that us, as the Erasmus Plus Peace Builder Network, will stand for peace, to prevent conflict, negotiate, and build this network of fellow peace advocates, work together, and make sure that this monitor and implement this declaration. So it is not over. It will also be on the website, so keep an eye. For now, as of right now, the website is down, but we're working on fixing it. But that will be it. So if you have signed up for the event, you will receive an email. You also have the link. So feel free to check the Google Docs. Again, it will be open for an entire week, so 7 days, to bring amendments and changes or add anything that you believe is relevant. But that will conclude the presentation of the declaration. Thank you so much for everyone who has been part of this work. And thank you for bringing peace and for being the change that we want to see in the world.
Thank you so much, Yasmina, for the wonderful presentation and for going through all the sections. And again, a very big thank you to all of you who have participated in the drafting process. I think we covered pretty well the many grants that we have identified, including many of the points that were mentioned in the two panels today. And I hope that we would be able to reach as many as possible, the stakeholders that we are targeting with this declaration. Again, I reiterate that is open for 1 week. So do make sure that your voice is included in that document if you have not participated. Of course, for being part of the network, you have contributed in one way or the other, but in more direct way, if you would like to contribute to the document, do take advantage of the 1 week timeline that we have to have your comment in there. And by the time we have all the comment by the 7th of March, we would also launch the process to begin the collection of the signature. Let me use this opportunity to again thank all of you and congratulate each and every one of you, especially the Erasmus Peace Builders Network, for being so diligent and committed to the trainings all through the past weeks, and now to this final forum, which is not the end, but the beginning, the end or the beginning of a new process. It's the end of one, but that is launching us into the beginning of the new process, being a network where we would exist to collaborate with each other and to support each other's work in building a more sustainable and peaceful world. So I'm very happy to be part of this process, and I hope you all are. And we want to use this opportunity to congratulate you and to ask that you keep doing the work that you do despite the difficulties that we see with the conflict situations around the world. This make our work more or less and more than ever more important, and you should not relent. So let's keep the fight going on. Let's keep struggling. Let's keep being active agent of peace and change in the world. Thank you so much. I will give back to the organizing team, Edita and Kate, who will give us the concluding words.
Thank you, Richard. It's actually very late where I am. But thank you everyone for joining us. To close our Erasmus Plus Peace Building Network Forum, I would like to thank all of you who are here, our panelists, trainers, workshop participants, and my fellows from Erasmus Network, Neringa, Edita, and Felix. This forum has given us a selection of food for thoughts from Africa to Latin America. The discussions make me realize several things, and I hope that I can summarize what our panelists have mentioned. Number one, in peace building, everyone is a stakeholder. Each one of us is responsible for ensuring that we are aware of our power, privileges, and resources that we can use to recreate nonviolent and inclusive societies. Number two, we need to respond to the root causes of violent conflicts by understanding the power relations of people among themselves and the structures that build them. Number three, peace building has science in it, from gathering data to using technology to innovate our knowledge sharing and peace intervention. Number four, peace building is interdependent and intersectional. Therefore, we need to recognize that there is a generation gap in approaches to peace building. Youth should be involved not just in the consultation, but in planning, in crafting policies, and the very implementation of projects and initiatives. Number five, peace building goes hand in hand with social justice and human rights. The women, children, the persons with disability, the indigenous people, the elders, the refugees, the victims of violent conflicts, from the margins to the center. No one should be left behind. Number six, our commitment to peace building should be long term and sustainable. Number seven, if war is profitable for the superpowers, peace is profitable for everyone. It gives power to the marginalized and the most vulnerable. And having said this, there is a need to invest in peace and peace building. And lastly, while it is very important that we continue to dialogue and seek ways to find commonality instead of differences, we need to walk our talk. We should go beyond being a speaker, but a practitioner of peace building. I would like to end with a quote from Luis Yako, an Iraqi American anthropologist, to decolonize our perception and approach to peace building. He said, we need to acknowledge that violence begets violence. There are no violent people who were not first violated. And alluding to Maya Calaria, I would like to say that we are all here not to sugarcoat conflict, but to be transformed by it. Let us all be the faces of peace building. Thank you, everyone, and I give the floor to my dear friend, Edita.
Rita, you're muted. Still muted.
Hello, everyone.
Yes.
Can you
Now
hear
it's
me?
right. Yes.
Thank you very much, Kate. Thank you very much, Neringa, and everyone who was participating in this huge, important project. I would like to say thank you for this informative and inspiring forum, too. Think globally, act locally. I'm sure our network will give huge impact for future collaborations for peace-building initiatives. Organizations are invited to co-sign Erasmus Peace Builders Declarations. It's very important for future impact as well. As this initiative evolves, we are happy to include more people to our network, our Peace Builders Network. Once again, thank you all for a huge focus in peace building. As Albert Einstein said, peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Edita, and thank you, Kate. Thank you to each and every one of you. And do have a good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are, and keep being the active peace agent that you are in your respective countries and home. Goodbye, and have a good moment wherever you are.